Good afternoon. We are going to start the October 24th, 2024 Diversion Board of Authority meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Don, could I get a roll call, please?
Mayor Carlson.
Here.
Mayor Dardis. Here. Mayor Mahoney.
Here.
Mr. Peterson. Mr. Hendrickson. Mr. Pepcorn.
Here.
Mr. Ebinger.
Here.
Ms. Kolpak.
Here.
Campbell.
Here.
Mrs. Sherling.
I'm here.
Mr. Grimberg.
Here.
Mr. Steen.
Here.
And Mr. Salzewald.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. Moving on, could I get a motion to approve the minutes from the September 26th, 2024 meeting?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Moving on, do I have a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Moving on to the consent agenda, there are a number of items on the consent agenda. Hopefully, you've all had time to look through them. But with these items, I would be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve. Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. With this, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mr. Ebinger.
Aye.
Ms. Kolpak.
Aye.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling.
Yes.
Mr. Grimberg.
Aye.
Mr. Steen.
Aye.
And Mr. Salzewald.
Aye.
Is everyone?
Thank you. Moving on to our regular agenda items, if we could get the co-executive director update, and I will turn this over to Mr. Michael Redlinger.
Good evening, or sorry, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Authority. We just have a brief update today on our compensation study. We had a really nice conversation with our preferred vendor that will be doing this study, and that is a group called MRA. That's a group that the City of Fargo is familiar with. And for that compensation study, we'll be moving forward with that entity, collecting data. We're going to find 10 peer organizations that we want to look to try to find peer comparisons for positions and those salaries of those positions, those qualifications of those positions that we will supply to the consultant. We're going to work together on collaborating on what that study will look like. But we have really good confidence in this team that they're going to be able to deliver us a compensation study likely later this year or in early January in 2025. One other special item that I'll place on a future Finance Committee agenda that will then be approved by the board is a membership in MRA. MRA actually works across multiple sectors and public entities, and what they do is they work on a membership model, almost like a cooperative, where you can participate as an employer in their cooperative and then get access to additional comp data and information every single year. And then they're also available with a helpline to our staff and the Diversion Authority in the future, and for the future director, to be able to call on them for HR counsel and advice. So it's a really modest cost of $750 annually to allow us to participate in their cooperative. And I will place that on a future agenda for the board's approval. But look forward to getting that off the ground. I think that that would be a really good process. And then, of course, today is our executive director interview day. We spent this morning with a number of individuals from our government entities as well as consultant teams and members of, say, like the Joint Resource Board, the Buffalo Red Group, et cetera, meeting with the candidates and collecting candidate impressions. And so that's what Robert and I will be working on this afternoon, and our staff here at the City of Fargo is collecting those candidate impressions so that by the time we gather with you later this afternoon, we will have that rolled up so you can see the feedback from all of the entities and the individuals that got a chance to talk to these candidates earlier this morning. So we're happy to be here to support that process today, and I really look forward to a successful day of interviews with our candidates. We thank them for their time, and most importantly, we thank you for your time today, taking that time to be here in the middle of the day and being a part of this process. Your insights are valuable, and are very much welcomed throughout this process. So thank you for everything you're doing to help us out, and Robert and I will be happy to assist the board at the end of your process tonight and with Tracy. And just a big kudos and thank you to Tracy too for helping us out with this. Cass County HR has been really the cornerstone and kind of the heart of this operation for this search process. So please thank Tracy as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Redlinger. Any questions at all for Mr. Redlinger in regards to the comp study update? Commissioner Sherling.
Thanks. I think I'm going to have to change seats here. This is a little awkward. Mike, can you tell me, you mentioned the wage analysis. What kind of comparable markets are you using? Because my understanding in just some casual conversations, the city of Fargo uses often a different set of markets than, for example, Cass County does when we're looking at perhaps law enforcement, for example. So I'm just wondering what have we established here?
That's a great question, Commissioner Sherling. Thank you for that. And so the good news is that we haven't established or set on any particular set of comp philosophy yet. We're really looking to the consultant to help guide us there for really two reasons. Number one, we have a number of unique job descriptions here in the Diversion Authority that don't exist elsewhere in the local governments. So there are some positions here that are a little bit different. As a result, a little bit more challenging to try grade and rate. But number two, what we will do is try to establish, as I mentioned, 10 pure entities where we think these positions may exist. They could be in the private sector, they could be in the public sector, but I think that what we've heard pretty clearly from our planning committee and from the executive leadership of the board is that they want to be with the market, certainly, but perhaps not a position of leading market or leading well beyond market, but rather being with the market so that we look commensurate and comparable to the other government entities of which the Diversion Authority is comprised. So if you think about the comp philosophies of Cass, Clay, Moorhead, Fargo, and West Fargo, we want to try, even though these are different jobs, try to pattern a bit of a look and a feel to something like that, where it's a step and grade system that perhaps will have 8, 9, 10 steps to top of range, but the individuals are really coming in with movement in a predictable comp model that will happen in their tenure with the program. So we look forward to kind of hearing a bit more from the consultant with their guidance and about how they would kind of point us to, or where they would point us to on that question. But I think no doubt we're looking for structure. And my last comment would be that we're looking for durability. We're looking for something that gives us a model not only for today and tomorrow, but for 2026, 7, 8, and beyond that we can return to and update and refresh. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Redlinger. Moving on to number 6, General Counsel update. And we do not have an update this month from our General Counsel. So the next item on the agenda is our land management update, and I will turn that over to our land management director, Jody Smith.
Yes, so you have the lands update in your packet. I know we're not going to go through it today. Just open to any questions that you may have as you reviewed it. So with no questions, then I think we'll go through. We do just have an update on the RIMP program. There's been a lot of discussions both at the MFDA Lands Committee and the Cass County Joint Board. So we thought we'd just give a brief update on where we're at with this. On the next slide, we go over the need for this. So the FM diversion required displacing approximately 12 farmsteads. This program is actually open to not just farmsteads, but rural businesses and nonprofits. We recognize there'd be a challenge with the Uniform Relocation Act and relocation benefits that were primarily there for residential properties, but really not situated for rural businesses and farmsteads. So again, this program was loosely based off of something that had been created in Minnesota. So the team worked many years ago prior to me starting here, devising this program. On the next slide, then you can see just an overview that the goal was to ensure that the construction and relocation for these producers was in place. It was important to us that we ensured that they could come, they could relocate within the region if they wanted to, and kind of help fill that gap when we do an appraisal. The appraisal is based off of market value, today's market, and we understand to rebuild a farmstead. Some of those buildings are 100 years old, and so the appraised value versus having to do a new build there could be a vast difference there. On this next slide then, again, some of the eligibility, you must operate a business or a farmstead or have a nonprofit. This is a forgivable loan, so for the first 5 years, it is a full value loan, and then it's reduced 20% per year thereafter. On the next slide, the eligibility, again, we kind of talked about that earlier. They have to be displaced. We do require that they provide us with documentation that their farmstead and all the structures out there are attached to their business. There's separate compensation for residential structures. We do have a guidance document. This board has reviewed and approved that guidance document. It's fairly thorough, so at the end you get a wrapped up report, and the MCC, JPA, and the Cass County Joint Board get a finalized number and something kind of in a package, but really there's months of work that goes into that because we need to acquire a lot of quotes and the appraisals and talk about depreciation and site work and everything that goes into that. So it does include our appraisers, our land agents, our management consultant staff, and of course legal counsel, just to get to that point. On the next slide then, you can see just the process. So we do have an approval process, a pre-approval process, just like if you go to buy a home, you go in and get your loan pre-approved. We do have that go into the boards because it takes us months of work to get us to the point where we would present that report to the board. We don't want our land agents and our consultants working and doing time on something that the board may not authorize in the future. We do have the loan RIMP report, and of course we actually have a mortgage and a promissory note and an escrow account. And again, we work diligently with them as they're paying those out. I know Mr. Helvey gave a presentation yesterday to the Lands Committee and this morning at Cass County Joint. Once those are released from the escrow account, he does frequently drive by the farm sites just to check in on them, sometimes take pictures. If somebody says they're building something, we want confirmation that that building is being built. On the next slide then, just so you know, our current budget is $20 million. When this was originally started, there was a budget of $5 million. Just weren't quite sure if there'd be the appetite from the producers to apply for a loan program. We have found that it's been exceptionally productive for us to have this. It's a tool in our toolbox when we're negotiating settlements. Not all producers want to rebuild. Some of them are seeing this as an opportunity to retire, but many of them do want to rebuild. So we have obligated or spent the $12.3 million. We have about $3 million on the table, meaning we have offered it to them. It is in our settlement negotiations, so it's a soft obligation essentially, and we will not spend those funds until we either settle with them or determine that we're out of money for the program. We have about $3.5 million in future loan estimates. So we sit down with the land agents, and based off the appraisals and communications with the property owners, we make some assumptions on who may or may not be eligible for the program. Again, they are not pre-approved, and so we have not set these funds aside for them. That leaves us with about $1.1 million remaining in this program budget. On the next slide then, you can see we tried to tie these out. So in the middle of the screen, there's an apple green color dot, and that is the Westby location. They're right in the Camel Hump, and they actually settled with us with the Cass County Joint Board through a land exchange, and so they were able to relocate their rural business just on the eastern side of SE2B. And so each of those dots then correlates with one of the pinpoints. You can see where they're moving from in the upstream mitigation area out to a different location. The Richards are the yellow one. You can see they're one of the ones that probably moved the furthest away. And so they have, had quite an undertaking. They're almost complete with the relocation. They do have a vacate date of January 15th of 2025. So most of these farmsteads are actively relocating, and I'll show you some pictures on the next slide. I think we must check those out. Are there any questions that I can answer about this or any of the lands updates?
Any questions for Ms. Smith? All right, seeing none,
Okay,
thank you very
thank you.
much. And just a reminder to board members that if you do want more information regarding the property acquisition status report, that is on page 134 of our packet. Moving on to the finance update, I'll turn it over to Mayor Davis.
Finance Committee met yesterday, and there were $8,638,140.44 worth of bills that were presented for this reporting period. Our net cash position at the present time is $294,973,488. We also had an update of our cash budget draft for 2025. It increased by about $2 million. But there are still a number of projects that are, we're not sure how they're going to be, if they're going to be completed in 2024. So there may be a lot of transfers that take place moving forward into the cash budget of 2025. So we'll have to wait and see how that's going. There's a number of projects that we thought would be completed in 2024 that have not. With that, Madam Chairman, I stand for any questions. Excuse me. We also got a brief report on sales tax collections for the 2022, 2023, and estimated for 2024. We'll have more information coming forward at the next meeting. There were some discrepancies as to how it was reported, and so we'll have an update on that and be much more accurate.
Thank you, Mayor Dardis. Any questions for Mayor Dardis?
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to project updates. I'm going to turn this over to Chris Buckegard for 9A, B, and C.
Thank you, Chair Carlson. Members of the board, quick update today. Terry couldn't join us this afternoon, so I will give a quick update on the core progress. A couple of things I probably won't go into as much detail as Terry would, but a couple of things that I've noted the last few weeks. They are nearing completion of the assembly of the second gate at the Red River site. Was out there yesterday with our executive director candidates, and it looks like they're getting that very close to being completed. I also know the Corps of Engineers is on site at the manufacturing plant this week, doing their final inspection of the gate manufacturing side of things in Alabama. So again, nearing completion of the third gate as well, as far as having that being able to be shipped. They're continuing to haul material across the river for stockpiling for the river closure next year, and continuing to work on the dam walls as well. So a lot of good progress being made at the Red River site this last month again, as usual. And a couple other notes, the SE3 project was put out for bid this last week. So that leaves us with just one more core segment, and that's SE5 that they're working towards advertising that project as well. And then real quick on the diversion channel side of things, again, just working hard to get prepped to be into winter construction. So there's a lot of bridge work going on right now. I think they've poured 2 or 3 decks on the bridges in the last month. There are girders being delivered pretty much every couple of days to construction sites. So working hard. I think we're nearing setting the first girders for the railroad bridges probably next month as well. So good progress on the bridge side, getting those as cleaned up as we can before the weather continues to change. Continuing excavation as well. I think we're over 27 million yards, I think I heard last week, as far as excavation quantities. So making nice progress there as well. Starting to get, anticipating we'll get some notices for some completion elements here, maybe yet this fall, depending on how weather treats us. So again, good progress on the construction side as well, and I'd stand for any questions you guys might have.
And are there any questions for Mr. Buckegard? Doesn't look like there's any, so you can move on to the next item on the agenda.
So yeah, safety this month, a good month, a few minor events. Most of I think the 3 recordable events were all just a little bit advanced first aid, some cuts that needed stitches and those kind of things. So nothing of significance on the safety side of things on any of our programs. So again, stand for any questions you might have related to the safety report.
Thank you. Any questions related to that report? All right, thank you, Mr. Buckegard. No questions. All right, and our P3 monthly update, and I will turn this portion of the agenda over to Paul Barthel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, we'll give just a brief update. There's a lot going on the P3 side. Chris gave a great summary on the construction. As for the couple of the high points, we are still waiting for the Attorney General's opinion on the open meetings for the DRB, so that is still on hold. We haven't heard anything back from that, so we're still waiting and preparing for that. And then the other side of that is that there have been continued dialogue and continued negotiations with the developer on a change order to incorporate some of the fish passage issues on, not issues, fish passage portions of the two aqueduct systems. We are very, very close to getting that one settled. And so we should hopefully continue to see progress that way and provide the environmental work that we need to do along with the heavy construction that's out there. So again, continuing to move forward. All the details are in your packet. Please feel to reach out. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. So.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions for Paul? All right, no questions for you. We are now at the point in our agenda where we would be having finalist interviews. The first one doesn't start until 1:30, so we can be in recess for the next 5 minutes or so. If you want to grab anything or make sure your pen works, make sure your microphone works. We are back from the recess of the Metro Flood Diversion Authority Board meeting and have moved on to the Executive Director finalist interviews on our agenda for today. First of all, this has been a very long and arduous process to get to this point where we are at today, and I really want to extend a lot of gratitude and appreciation to our co-executive directors who have gotten us to this point. So thank you, Mr. Redlinger and Mr. Wilson. And also during this interview and application process, a lot of appreciation and gratitude to Tracy and her staff at the Cass County Human Resources. You guys have put in a lot of work, a lot of behind the scenes effort, and just really want to extend that gratitude and appreciation. And last but not least, thank you to Chris Bachigard for giving some tours this afternoon to two of our finalists, and also to my Vice Chair, Tony Grinberg, because he was very helpful in assisting myself and Michael and Robert and Tracy in this process as well. So thank you, Mr. Benson, for joining us. I know that you are 8 hours ahead of us, so hopefully, good things are to come for us here in Fargo. We will go around the room and do introductions so that you know who all is here. And at that point in time, I will turn it over to Tracy to explain to the board members what is in our packet, and she will be the one answering all of the questions, or asking all of the questions. So Shelley Carlson, Board Chair and Mayor of Moorhead, and I'll turn to my left to have my Vice Chair introduce himself and around the room.
Good afternoon, General Benson, Tony Grinberg.
Mary Sherling.
Good afternoon, Denise Kolpak, City of Fargo.
Kevin Campbell, Clay County.
Larry Selderold, City of Moorhead.
David Ebbinger, Clay County.
Dave Pepcorn, Fargo.
Bernie Dargis, Mayor, West Fargo.
Rick Steen, Joint Board.
Tim Mahoney, Mayor Fargo.
And Councilmember Chuck Hendrickson will be joining us momentarily. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Tracy Peters.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. How's that? Is that good? All right. Thank you. So all of you should have received a packet of information that we will use for interviews this afternoon. The packets contain the resume and cover letters submitted by the applicants. They contain the questions that will be asked. And then there's also a scoring sheet for you folks to fill out as we move through these interviews. I will collect the scoring sheets at the conclusion of the third interview, and I will tally up those results during the time that OmniView is doing a presentation on their findings. They were hired to perform sort of a personality test or something along those lines that they will be presenting to you around 4:30 today. And then after that presentation, you'll receive the results of the scoring sheets. You'll be given a copy of what comments that were collected this morning during the meet and greets. And then it will be open for a discussion after that. So that's kind of how the afternoon will play out.
Mr. Rettlinger, do you have, okay. We lost you momentarily, Mr. Benson, so you are back on. Now we can see you again. Can you hear us okay? I should have asked that at the beginning.
Everyone hear me?
Yes. All right.
All right, thank you.
All right.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Benson, before we start with questions, I just want to let you know that we have 15 questions today, and the interview will last approximately 50 minutes. So I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the time frame that you would have per question. Does that sound fair?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. So the first question, you received a scenario last week regarding the information provided to you from your engineering director and issues arising with a contractor. Describe to us your thought process, analysis, and how you would use your management style and communication skills to resolve the hypothetical exercise and engage with various stakeholders.
All right, thanks. Yeah, it was a very interesting and thoughtful question. But the first thing that I did as I worked through this process was really identify the core issue, and then from there, went through and identified the key components of how I would resolve the issue, and then there were some additional items of interest in the contract, or in the scenario where the contractor, because of various political affiliation, potential threats to diversion authority employees, and some other challenges, I addressed those outside of the contractual issue, because I think first and foremost, we can't let emotions drive contractual agreements and processes, but at the same time, those types of issues, such as concerns of employees and threats, definitely have to be addressed in a formal manner to make sure that, as I stated in my written statement, that all of our employees deserve to work in a safe environment where they're treated fairly and equitably.
All right, thank you. Mr. Benson, please describe your last position and tell us what you liked best about the job.
All right, thanks. So I've served as the Cass County engineer since 2011, so the last 13 years. And I think the biggest thing that I've enjoyed with the job is the variety of functions and interactions that I have in that role. As the county engineer, I participate in a wide number of boards and interact with a lot of commissions, as well as have the opportunity to interact with a wide range of different community officials. So whether it's dealing with growth in portions of our community, like the city of Horace, rural issues, working with rural townships, and the North Dakota DOT in more of the rural part of the county, working with the water resource districts, and then working with entities like the North Dakota Association of Counties, County Engineers Association, and being able to get out and participate in the North Dakota legislative process, participating in supporting legislation for North Dakota counties and for the County Engineers Association. So all of those opportunities is something I think I've really enjoyed about the job. It gives me a wide range of things to manage and a wide variety of disciplines to deal with, including not just highway and roads and bridges, but dealing with water resource issues, the diversion project, vector control, mosquito control, which I've dealt with, quite a bit in the summer months, and then planning, being very active in the planning process with the planning department that falls underneath the Cass County engineer, and dealing with the planning, the Cass County Planning Commission.
All right, thank you. What would you consider to be the skills that are necessary to be an effective executive director? And how would you bring your specific skills to the executive director position?
All right, I think some of the key skills is, the leadership skills to lead the organization. So having an understanding of how to lead a dynamic organization that is changing and growing, or we'll be adjusting as we move the project from construction to operations and maintenance. And then beyond that leadership, I think the collaboration, as you look across the table, all of you sitting there, there's a wide range of experiences, wide range of organizations that you represent, from Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, Cass County, Clay County, the water resource districts. So understanding the interaction of all the entities that participate and are members of the Diversion Authority, plus understanding and being able to collaborate with other entities such as rural townships and smaller cities, and probably more importantly, the Corps of Engineers, building those relationships with all those entities, including continuing to build upon our relationship with the Corps of Engineers staff out of the St. Paul district.
All right, thank you. Describe to us your experience with implementing public sector HR policies and procedures.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so about 7 or 8 years ago, the Cass County Human Resources did an update on its policy for the overall personnel policy, and I sat in on that as a member of that small committee that included that time the then HR director, as well as the county administrator and several other county department head staff. And so that was definitely a great experience in helping to rewrite that manual and understanding the various policies and labor requirements, labor laws. Through my master's degree at University of Mary, I also had several classes on HR responsibilities in management, and then through my military experience, I also served as a human resources director on my deployment to Iraq, where a lot of the function was understanding the military regulations to human resources for promotions, annual evaluations, awards, and those types of activities. So I've had kind of a wide breadth of HR experience, as well as just the annual process that we use at Cass County to evaluate positions, whether it's a new position or a changing position, so that we can reevaluate how someone's position has changed and how that could impact their scale of pay, whether it's their pay grade or the step that they should be at. So that's a process that I've worked with quite a bit, as the county highway department has had some additional staff over the years that have been added, and then some of the staff have had changing roles. So understanding the process to make sure people are being paid equitably for the work that they're doing, whether they're doing it at a higher or a lower level than what they originally were hired.
Okay, thank you. Establishing a new vision often meets with strong resistance. Provide an example that best illustrates your ability to overcome others' resistance to new ideas and directions.
All right. I think in leadership, that's something that you find in small and big ways throughout your time in leadership roles. I know when I first took over as the county engineer, we didn't have a long-term comprehensive plan, and so that was something that over the first 2 years that I worked with our staff and really tried to push towards developing. And there was some internal friction and pushback, because with the thought that once we have a 5-year comprehensive plan, that it's going to lock us in and we won't have some of the flexibility, or there's just the amount of work and effort to put into building such a plan and product. But once we were about a year to 2 years into having that 5-year comprehensive plan and updating it every year, and it's something that the County Highway Department staff continues to do and continues to update every year, it's shown that it's been a product that is not only used by the Highway Department staff, but used by the elected officials, by the general public, to really identify and understand why we select different road projects, why we select different bridge projects, and as well as just understanding the 5-year outlook for funding and overall projects for bridges and roads.
How would a subordinate describe your leadership or management style?
I think in general it would be active leadership, but not micromanagement. I'm an active leader in that I provide guidance, intent, and kind of the why behind the issues, and then allow some flexibility for subordinates to identify different solutions and opportunities, so that it's not just me directing them on how they have to do their work, but directing and guiding the process, guiding the organization in a management style that allows for people to use their skills to bring out the best in them and bring out the best in the organization.
Part of being a leader is the ability to remove obstacles that stand in the way of your employees' success in executing a plan or assignment. Tell us about a time that you were the most proud of your ability to remove obstacles.
Oh, that's a good question. Let me think for a second. I think in several of our projects where we've been able to work collaboratively with some of the other organizations, where we started out as just an internal county project, and for example, 12th Avenue North used to extend all the way to 45th Street in Fargo, and we had a project that that we had a lot of issues, some safety concerns with that road because it was a narrow 2-lane asphalt paved road. And initially our focus was just to spend the money to do the overlay. And then through some meetings with MetroCog, working with Fargo and West Fargo, we ended up combining the project with a number of federal aid opportunities and built that project out to where the first half mile or so that was in Fargo, immediately west of 45th Street, got built as part of the project, as well as the components that were inside of West Fargo from where the city limits of Fargo end, and then all the way out to the Cheyenne Diversion. And that project ended up being a 3-lane concrete road that significantly improved the safety and the transportation, especially since it's a heavier truck route. There's several larger facilities, including larger businesses and aggregate and concrete facilities. So the overall project in the end became a much bigger, much better project and brought in funding from a lot of other sources instead of just the county. And so our roughly $1 million that we would have spent on the asphalt overlay went towards this larger project, collaborating with Fargo and West Fargo to get the much larger project complete. And in doing so, my staff that initially were working on just how they could do this asphalt overlay, and by me doing the collaboration and working with the cities of Fargo and West Fargo, we were able to work past those various challenges and get the bigger project complete.
Sometimes we find ourselves at odds with positions that may be strongly held by key figures in the organization. Tell us about a time when you had to tactfully disagree with a key figure to avoid escalating conflict. What did you say or do?
Well, as the county engineer, I've had a number of different interactions, especially with members of the public and some of the more rural districts. And for example, down in Horace, the Horace area with Stanley Township, I've had a number of ongoing challenges with the planning and zoning aspects of the county and Stanley Township. And over the course of a number of years, I've continued to participate when asked in those township meetings, even though I know that they're going to be very challenging because I'm going to be asked some probably some tough questions and not be brought in a very good light based on some of the comments from some of the people. And so, to me, I think it's all about being professional, sticking to the facts, and not making it personal, and not saying things that would be unprofessional or demeaning. So that's how I've really approached it in some of those tougher meetings, like down in Stanley Township. Again, stay professional. Don't let emotions get involved. And if it is something where we can, if possible, then to ask to take it off to the side. Maybe it's something that there's some other behind the scenes component that you're missing, and it's more challenging in a public meeting. But in that way, if you can talk off to the side, it provides an opportunity to discuss it with somebody where maybe in a public setting they feel more with their back against the wall, and they're going to be a little bit more aggressive in how they respond to you.
Describe the most difficult or challenging work-related problem that you have solved. What was your approach for analyzing and solving the problem?
The most challenging problem that I've solved. Well, I've been fortunate that I've had a wide range of experience and opportunities from flooding to road projects to the military. One military experience that I had was in 2017. My armored battalion that's headquartered in Moorhead was tasked to deploy to Lithuania for a NATO exercise. And once we were there, we had 72 hours to get the ship unloaded and have everything moved across the country of Lithuania. But yet we only had several hundred soldiers to complete that task because of different requirements for soldiers that were as far as how long they could be on orders for their 2 to 3 week annual training. So with that, we had a very comprehensive task and built a very key logistical and tracking processes to make sure that as every tank and armored vehicle came off the ship, that we had the right people with the right license on the right equipment to load it, get it on whether it was on a train to ship it by train, on a truck to ship by truck, and then offload it on the far side. And we were able to complete that in the allotted time, and we were commended by the overall commander for U.S. forces, or U.S. Army forces at the time. So that was definitely kind of an out of the box scenario that I had to deal with. Ultimately, we ended up having over 800 soldiers that took part in the exercise, but again, because of that fell underneath, and those 800 soldiers fell under my command, but because of the interactions, again, based on their timing of how long they could be there for training, it was definitely a challenge to manage the activities and the capabilities of each soldier and each piece of equipment.
Describe your experience with financial data. How proficient are you with financial data? Provide an example that illustrates your proficiency.
Well, every year, since being the county engineer, I've taken part in our annual budgeting process. And so through that, I understand the financial process within the county and in the county accounting. So understanding revenues and then forecasting expenditures and making sure that, and as well as understanding what additional funding has to be left in the balance to make sure that from a funding standpoint, from how the overall how Cass County gets looked at from a fiduciary standpoint, they have to have, I believe it's generally in that 20 to 25% of funds of expenditures. They have to have that in funds available at the end of the fiscal year. You can't draw down to just to nearly zero or 5 or 10%. It's a fairly significant amount. So every year through the budgeting process that I've taken part in, I've put together the Highway Department budget documents, including personnel, the personnel budget, the building and maintenance budget for upkeep of facilities, including just whether it's heating, electricity, all those components, and then larger projects, budgeting for roads, bridges, and larger pieces of equipment, new equipment purchases. And then tracking those budgets throughout the year to make sure that we're on target and on track, especially within the highway department. It ebbs and flows dramatically. In the winter, you don't have a lot of expenditures, but of course, during the summer construction season, the expenditures can rapidly go from just in the hundreds of thousands to the millions, if not tens of millions, based on projects being completed and the overall work. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge for me, is making sure as those larger months, June, July, August, September, as the expenditures come in, that we're staying on target for our overall end of year expenditures at the end of December.
Please describe some specific examples of how you have been able to remove barriers to collaboration and teamwork.
So that's something I think I've been really proud of some of the collaboration and teamwork that I've done throughout my time as the county engineer, whether it's in working with entities at MetroCog, working with other counties, and through the Association of Counties and County Engineers Association, but definitely just in the Fargo West Fargo area, the collaboration that I've been able to do on different road projects that are right on the edge of Fargo, West Fargo, and Horace. I've been really proud of those types of projects. For example, this past summer, we completed a 2-year construction project, or a year and a half project, down at the intersection of County Road 17, which is also known as Cheyenne Street in West Fargo, and 52nd Avenue. And that was a collaborative project to expand the roundabout, which ultimately added a second lane for most of that roundabout, and then included constructing the new bridge on the Cheyenne River on 52nd Avenue. And because there's a dam underneath there that holds water back for the Cheyenne River intake to the Fargo water supply, that was another component to that project. So working over multiple years, I worked alongside of Fargo, West Fargo, and Horace staff, as well as the North Dakota DOT, to work on getting that project collaboratively built and funded. And I think whether it's sitting down and having those initial discussions is important, and then continuing to build on those discussions. Sometimes some of these bigger problems, you talk about them once or twice, and maybe they don't really go anywhere, but you got to keep going after them, and being collaborative, and realizing that it's more about the overall taxpayer's dollar, because the average taxpayer, an average motorist, doesn't know when they're in that roundabout on 52nd Avenue, and when they're in Fargo, when they're in West Fargo, when they're in Horace, or when they're on a Cass County paid for road. And so it's important that we come together to build the best infrastructure at the lowest price for all of our taxpayers.
Tell us about a time when you were able to stand firm in your position without alienating others and eventually gain support for your position.
Well, there's been a number of flood meetings over the years that I've had to stand for my thoughts. Like, for example, after the 2009, 10, and 11 floods, the Cass County Highway Department was active in acquisition of a large number of homes down in the 76th Avenue, Forest River, 88th Avenue area. And in collaborating with the county commission, understanding their desires and the county's perspective for the acquisitions. When I was at public meetings, I would often, have a lot of negative feedback about the county's position, and so I had to, be firm, stand strong on behalf of the county, even though it's challenging when you're looking at someone in the face and they may have tears in their eyes as they're contemplating losing their home through the acquisition process. But you have to stand firm but at the same time, you have to be compassionate when you're working with people like that. You just can't be dismissive of their thoughts, because their thoughts and their emotions do matter. So standing firm, but being respectful.
Give an example of a situation in which you prepared a plan for a team that you led, which was not successful or not completed as planned. How did you deal with being unsuccessful, and what did you tell your team members?
Yeah, I think a good example would be recently we've applied for several of our several grant opportunities through the federal Highway Administration, and convincing staff that amongst all the other things that they're doing to get to work towards projects that are in the budget, but looking multiple years out towards potential funding opportunities and getting them on board to put the effort into putting together the grant application and all of the work that goes into that. It's a tough sell to get everybody on board and moving in the same direction. And in several cases, those grant applications have not resulted in what we wanted, and we weren't able to get any funding out of it. So, at the end of that, sitting down with the team, talking through what we did, how we could have done better, really, kind of doing an after actions review of the process that we used, what we submitted, and how, if there was an opportunity in the future, how we could do it better to make sure that we're not increasing costs for the grant application process. But again, taking what we did the first time, and if we're going to use it, if we're going to apply for a second time, to maximize what we did in the first round, to hopefully be successful in the second. And especially after the second or third time, it's tough, because at Cass County, we pride ourselves in trying to do as much as we can internally without and limit the amount of consultant work that we do. So convincing our employees that putting in those extra hours to write up a grant application and to track down the data and get the information compiled in a professional way that's going to look good in a grant application can be difficult, like I said, especially when employees have multiple tasks and multiple activities ongoing.
Tell us about a time when you had to convert a general strategy or vision into a detailed implementation plan. Describe your approach and the details of your plan.
Yeah, I think my example of our 5-year comprehensive highway and bridge plan, every year updating that, but then once we have that, the next year, taking that information from the broader plan and building it into what we're going to submit for the budget and what we're going to design and build. So because it is a comprehensive process to take it from the larger plan and really kind of screen through as changes happen in whether it's changes in funding, because in some cases we get additional funding that's come up through opportunities through the North Dakota legislature or other grant opportunities or federal funding. So making sure that we're rigid in sticking to our budget and sticking to the core components of our projects that we've committed to the public and to the county commission, but at the same time flexible, so that way when something bigger comes up, maybe a bridge that wasn't expected to be load restricted or all of a sudden a bridge that comes up with some sort of other deficiency, that we can change the bridges around to make sure that a bridge that has a higher priority now can get included into the budget, included into the design process, and get ahead of maybe some other good projects, but not as high priority because of the changes from a safety and efficiency standpoint.
Tell us about the most important strategic decision you have ever made. How did you make your decision?
That's a great question. My wife would probably say that marrying her was probably the number one. I've had a lot of between my time as the county engineer dealing with flooding, dealing with road and bridge projects, as well as my military time. I've had a lot of fairly consequential decisions. I think a recent one that worked out great and was a big challenge on how we were going to get after it was the spring of 2023 flood, where we had to quickly come together as a team between Fargo and Cass County on how we're going to build sandbags and where we were going to do that. Because of some challenges, we decided, and I really pushed for that we could do that at the Cass County Highway Department, and we were able to move forward with that, collaborate directly with the city of Fargo, and quickly build the team, get the volunteers in, and in short order have several 100,000 sandbags built for both the city of Fargo and for Cass County rural residents. And so that was a decision to bring to the county commission and bring to the city of Fargo, that Cass County, that we could get it done and support the community with our sandbag operations. And it ultimately was very successful. It was very demanding, very, very stressful time. But at the same time, it ended in a very successful campaign to get those sandbags built and be prepared for the floodwaters. Fortunately, it didn't get as bad as we thought it, but again, we always need to be prepared.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benson, and thank you, Tracy. Board members may have follow-up questions, but we also want to make sure that you have an opportunity first to ask us questions. We will end the interview promptly at 2:20. So let's first start with you, and if you have any questions for us.
All right. Well, first, thank you for the opportunity today. I really appreciate it. I know it's been a big process to go through the selection, and I'm really honored to be on the finalist list. And I appreciated the first round of interviews and the questions that were there. I guess my only question would be, when it comes to the overall executive director position, is there anything specific that you think I don't know that I should, that is that would be a top challenge or top issue that maybe is recent that I'm not aware of?
Well, that is an excellent question for us. I could think of probably 10 different issues and challenges that have presented itself in the last 6 months or so. With any project of this level, particularly when you have split delivery, you have some friction that is going to organically just happen between the Metro Flood Diversion Authority and our P3 partner, and also the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And it's through that collaboration and constant communication that we are, hoping that we're going to be able to work through all of those issues to deliver the type of flood project that we want here in the Fargo-Moorhead, Cass, and Clay County area. In regards to you mentioned about the executive director position itself, really want somebody who is going to be able to lead the team and work with a multitude of different professionals. There's a lot of different elected officials on this board that are representing a lot of different entities. So you have 13 fantastic, wonderful personalities to work with, but you also have a multitude of contractors to work with. There's a really great staff that has been here, that has been put in place over the last couple of years, and they've done a phenomenal job. So I think really somebody who is that leader that can look at that overall big picture, but at times be able to go down the rabbit hole and look at all the details as well. I don't know if Mayor Mahoney, if you'd like to add anything.
Jason, your boss has been in the county in the past, and one of the transitions is it seemed that the previous executive director lost a little touch with board members. How are you going to guarantee that you move on to Board 13 and keep the relationships with the 13? We're going to have a strong chairman that's from the county, but are you going to listen to our Minnesota partners? How are you going to manage that?
Thanks, Mayor Mahoney. I think it's being first open and accessible to the board, not just to the chair, but to all the board members, and as well as those the committee, the heads of the various committees, because there are a wide range of different issues and a wide range of priorities based on each entity. So I think providing good, consistent communication to the chair, but strong communication across the overall board of authority and all the member entities. And then I know that for example, some of the experiences I've had in Moorhead, where I've had to communicate with the city there because of our vector control contract that we've got. And so it's just being open and honest in those discussions and try to work collaboratively to resolve, as we work across the borders. So I think that's something that I've had an opportunity to do. So it's not just my experience in Cass County with Fargo and West Fargo, but across a wide variety of entities.
Right. Any other board members have any questions? Commissioner Kolpak.
Yes, hi, Jason. Thank you very much. Denise Kolpak here. My question is, as this project continues, comes to its completion, and then gets into operations and maintenance, communication with the public is going to continue to be extremely important with transparency. So can you talk about your approach, both from preparation and kind of working with the media, your philosophy about responding to media and your experience with that?
Yeah, thanks. And I think my biggest experience with the media is between flood events and then different road and bridge projects. But a vast majority of it has been more with different flood events. And so it's being first open and available to the media, and then making sure that trying to stay ahead. In some cases, the media they want to showcase the story, and so you have the opportunity to get ahead of the story, or you can let the story develop on its own without your input. And I think it generally it's better to try to stay ahead on the issue and reach out to again, whether it's something as like opening up a new component of the project, making sure that we've got a good media plan to handle that, but also when we know something maybe more challenging that's coming down, how we have that we have a good media plan to be able to not just be reactive but proactive. And then again, not just me, but making sure that the board and the chair are prepared and ready to answer any questions, especially if they're more technical of nature, or that some new information that they're not aware of prior to going in and doing media interviews.
Thank you. And that is all the time we have now for this interview. So we really want to extend our appreciation for you to make the appropriate arrangements so that we could have the interview with you, because we know that you're probably going to get ready to go to bed after this interview. So thank you very much. And also, thank you for your service, General. We really admire you for taking that on in your life. So, all right, thank you. And with that.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the time.
And with that, we will be in recess for another 5 minutes. Prepare for the next interview. Thank you. So we are on to our next interview with Mr. Daniel Sundberg. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope you had a great tour yesterday and participation with the meet and greet earlier this morning. I am Shelley Carlson, the chair of the Metro Flood Diversion Authority. I should say chair this year. And the Moorhead Mayor will go around the room and we'll introduce ourselves. And then I'm going to be turning it over to the Cass County Assistant Director and HR Director, Tracy Peters, and she will be the one asking all of the questions and kind of setting the parameters of the interview today. So, and I will turn to my left for the Vice Chair to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sundberg. Tony Grinberg. I'm actually the Vice Chair of the FM Diversion Authority as well as a Cass County Commissioner. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Mary Sherwin, Cass County Commissioner.
Hi, Denise Kolpak, Fargo City Commission.
Kevin Campbell, Clay County Commission.
Larry Selderold, Moorhead City Council.
David Ebinger, Clay County Commission.
Dave Peppercorn, Fargo City Commission.
Sundberg, Bernie Dardis, Mayor, West Fargo.
Rick Steen, Cass County Joint Water Board.
Good morning, Mayor Fargo.
Chuck Hendrickson, Morton City Council.
All right, and we do have one individual that is missing from our board. We do have 13 board members. Obviously, you're representing Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, Cass County, Clay County, and then the Watershed District. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Tracy Peters to begin the interview questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we start with the questions, Mr. Sundberg, I just want to let you know that we have 15 questions, and the interview is slated for 50 minutes. So that's kind of your guide as to how much time you want to utilize to answer the questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, all clear.
Okay. All right. So you received a scenario last week regarding the information provided to you from your engineering director and issues arising with the contractor. Describe to us your thought process, analysis, and how you would use your management style and communication skills to resolve the hypothetical exercise and engage with various stakeholders.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me here today. It's an honor to be a finalist for this project. That was a really interesting scenario, pretty complex.
Do you want to move your microphone just a little closer?
Sure. Quite a complex scenario there. But I'm sure it's not abnormal for a type of situation like this, like the diversion, which is a very unusual, dynamic, stressful, and personal endeavor for a lot of people. With a lot of different stakeholders and entities, whether it's counties, private practices, townships, states. But in this scenario, you know, the first step is to do some analysis, understand the situation. You got to take a step back and try to get the whole picture of what's going on. And so, you know, I thought through that. So really understand the situation, assess the stakeholders. You got to, of course, this came directly to the director of engineering. So I would start with him and understand what he knows about the situation. Of course, what was Billy Ray Brooks was the person of interest, the Brooks excavation. He, the number one concern was the toxic relationship that was reported that, you know, has to be resolved. In situations, I believe that when you have someone acting or being perceived as providing some sort of conflict, it has to be addressed. The more you let it sit there and fester, it's just going to get worse. And I would encourage that we would, apply, leverage the resources we have with the general counsel to do an investigation to see to verify the accusations and assess the way forward to really protect the authority and the project to make sure that this doesn't snowball into something worse. Sometimes people that are acting that inappropriate like that, they just need a simple redirection. They're just ignorant of what they're saying, and they can be redirected and we can move forward. In some cases, it's so drastic and they're unwilling to change that we have to explore options to terminate the contract. When it comes to his frustrations with the pay, again, this has to be, I would set up a meeting with Brooks Excavation and really understand what are the terms in which they're concerned of. Right now, it's just hearsay between him and the director of engineering. I think it needs to be investigated more. There is, he's the guy on the ground who knows what the situation. And it has to be noted that he signed a contract that he has to live up to. Now, sometimes situations on the ground change and they have to be evaluated. And maybe that's something we need to entertain is some sort of change to the pay based off of, circumstances that arise after the fact. In my background, I understand that, some of these contracts get drafted years before they're actually executed and things change between, signing and the actual execution phase. If it's just a frustration, he just wants to get paid more because he may have seen some other contract, got paid at a different rate for similar work, it can be a discussion, but ultimately he signed a contract that he has to support.
Please describe your last position and tell us what you liked best about the job.
Well, my current position, I'm a plant manager for a agriculture soybean seed facility in West Fargo. The best part of the job, well, it's a great company that I work for. I have really great coworkers there that are hardworking. It's really the people. You know, my background, the last 20 years of my professional career was in the military, and I transitioned for various reasons to be retired because I was qualified and settled down here in Fargo. But I'm not an agronomist, and yet I work in agriculture. I'm a leader in agriculture, and I have to leverage the expertise of the people that work for me, listen to them, and apply, you know, what they teach me, what they tell me, and lead the way for them, help them find priorities, and get the results that we need to advance our mission. So really, it's the people, it's the challenge of something new, and it's about, you know, ultimately our end customer are the farmers and the growers of North Dakota, South Dakota, and Northwest Minnesota.
What would you consider to be the skills that are necessary to be an effective executive director? And how would you bring your specific skills to the executive director position?
Yeah, the skills that I think are really important are, you know, of course, leadership, management, listening skills, making sure people feel that they're heard. When it comes to leadership, you know, I define that as providing the purpose, direction, and motivation towards a desired end state or goal. And, you know, clear we have an end state or goal here, and that's a sustainable flood protection for the Fargo-Moorhead metro area. And we have a lot of, you know, over the last couple of days, I've met a lot of very competent experts out there that, while I am not an engineer, there's a lot of engineers out there that can coach me up and advise me to provide you guys the best possible courses of action to consider and recommendations. The other thing is that over my experience in leadership is that leaders go to the point of friction. They go there to understand the situation, to take notes, and then to go back to the decision makers or their board and provide recommendations in a fully thought out, you know, means and process.
Describe to us your experience with implementing public sector HR policies and procedures.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Describe to us your experience with implementing public sector HR policies and procedures.
Sure. So, you know, as my resume states, I spent 20 years in the military, active duty, and a couple of the capacities. I was a commander in charge of soldiers, their health and welfare of them and their families. I was a chief of staff of a brigade and a battalion where we had an HR department that was amongst our staff that I led. And, you know, I've 20 years in the military and working in the Pentagon. I understand the importance of bureaucratic processes. And, you know, we live in a very complex world, complex communities, complex organizations, and we need policies that help us guide us on our way to be fair, to be fair and equal to all. And HR are some of the hardest decisions we have to make. They have to be thought out, and the second and third order effects have to be considered. The most important part is being fair to all. I mean, you know, when you make these decisions, people are watching, and you have to be consistent. And so there's, I mean, a number of situations where I've been in where you have to make some tough calls, and you got to understand what's public information and what's private information. You have to, you know, consider the personal lives, the people involved, and ultimately you have to find a way to communicate clearly to all the parties involved. You know, because people talk, and there'll be rumors and myths, and perception is reality in a lot of respects, so you have to consider that as well.
Establishing a new vision often meets with strong resistance. Provide an example that best illustrates your ability to overcome others' resistance to new ideas and directions.
Yeah, one of my last assignments in the military was I was the commander of Al Asad Air Base. I was an Army officer in charge of an air base with an Air Force squadron on there. And so I was of course, the chief executive there of the base. And so I came in with some ideas of how I wanted to secure the base. That was ultimately my responsibility. But the Air Force had other requirements that provided some sort of challenges to our ability to secure the base. But ultimately, we had to get the mission done. And a lot of times, that comes with assessing the risk that you're being presented with. And when there's situations that you need to find a common solution, you need to assess the risk, test them out, find some accommodations, and find ways to mitigate those risks as they present themselves. But ultimately, it's like it's not me alone. I had a team with me that helped me analyze the information. I had stakeholders I had to bring along. Sometimes there were long conversations that had to be held to find a common ground to achieve, our end state.
How would a subordinate describe your leadership or management style?
Yeah, hopefully well, I think I spent 20 years in the federal government, so I understand bureaucracy. I'm a bit of a bureaucrat. I have a public policy degree. I'm a bit of a policy wonk. I love current events and history. So I'm not afraid of getting in the details. I also have learned that it's very important for a leader to be out there on the ground. I don't want to be that leader there's Dan in his office. I don't want to be that guy. And the best way to understand your project, your organization, is to get there on the ground and see what's happening. And the hardest part about that is finding that balance of how often do you need to be out there in the dirt, and how often you got to be behind the computer in the meeting room.
Part of being a leader is the ability to remove obstacles that stand in the way of your employees' success in executing a plan or assignment. Tell us about a time that you were the most proud of your ability to remove obstacles.
Yeah, there's a concept of servant leadership that I try to embody, and I define servant leadership as the leader that goes out there and sees a subordinate that's struggling, either coaches them up, takes away that obstacle that they're facing to let them find their success. One of my companies in Iraq was in charge of our entry control point. They had hundreds of people walk through the gate, 50 or so vehicles a day that they had to inspect. And there was an adjacent, there was an Iraqi base that surrounded ours. And that Iraqi commander was my peer. I had to go out there, and some of his employees soldiers were inhibiting some of the traffic coming in. And it presented great danger to our soldiers as we were limiting our ability to effectively, inspect the people coming on the base. So I went out there with my team and talked to him and explained the situation and the process and why we're doing what we're doing. And it made my subordinate successful and his team successful. It kept our base safe. And it was a considerable threat that we faced that I'm quite proud of being able to address and be successful.
Sometimes we find ourselves at odds with positions that may be strongly held by key figures in the organization. Tell us about a time when you had to tactfully disagree with a key figure to avoid escalating conflict. What did you say or do?
Yeah, well, you know, part of my personality is I enjoy discussion. I encourage discussion. We all come from different backgrounds and perspectives and different entities that we care deeply about. And, you know, we all have to be heard. But when a decision is made, we all have to come together and accept it, come together and move forward and set aside our differences and understand that we came to a decision and we have to go out there. And regardless if I didn't agree with it, you know, I would be the good soldier and go out and fight for it. I've had conflict with, if you want to call it that, with several bosses, and we've gotten along well, very well. I've never been fired from a position. I still have all my former bosses in my phone, and I'll contact them when I need or whenever I can. But there was a situation where I disagreed with my boss on how we were organizing our fleet to get on a rail, to get from one country to another in Eastern Europe. And I explained my position that, you know, the artillery pieces should go at a certain position in order to download and have time to refuel and do maintenance as necessary. And their focus was more on getting some of the sustainment stuff forward. And then I learned from him through this discussion he had additional information that I didn't know. And it was because of that discussion that we had, and I learned from him that information that I didn't have at the previous time when I, was advocating for my course of action, that I then understood. There was more to the story than I knew. And once I had that information, I, fully supported, of course.
Describe the most difficult or challenging work-related problem that you have solved. What was your approach for analyzing and solving the problem?
The most difficult, geez. Work-related. So, the most difficult decision I've had to make was deciding whether or not to stay in the Army, maintain that career, or get out. I served 20 years in the military, really proud of it, extremely successful from my perspective. But it was time for me to, my oldest daughter is 10 and is 11, has lived in 5 different houses. So it was time for me to settle down and come home. And my wife's from Fargo, so we decided to settle down here, and we absolutely love it. But it is about doing some. You have to do mission analysis of the situation. Really understand what's important for you, what's important for the organization, and then it's about coming up with courses of action, evaluating those courses of action, comparing them, scoring them, and then ultimately coming up with a decision or a recommendation to your board or your family or whatever the entity is that you're looking at. The most difficult though, when I've come to a work-related decision, that's tough. I would say there was times in, I guess, Afghanistan where we were patrolling in southern Kandahar, and we'd have to decide, what route we're going to take. And the easiest route would be down the road. The straight line distance, and you get there, and your team is safe. But that's the most dangerous too when it comes to the threats that you have out in the open or roadside bombs. There was one time where we had to navigate through, these really treacherous grape fields, climbing over walls, taking the longer path. is sometimes the safest. Those situations in my career where I've been tested in very catastrophic situations would have made me better, and it has helped me develop to be a cool, calm, collected leader that in times of crisis can relax, can assess the situation, and make a decision. I'm really proud of my 6 deployments that my soldiers that have worked for me have come home. And a lot of that has to do with luck. You know, sometimes it's not about how good I was as a leader or the team I had around me. It came down to luck, and it came through hard work.
Describe your experience with financial data. How proficient are you with financial data? Provide an example that illustrates your proficiency.
Yeah, so I have an undergrad in economics. I have a public policy degree where we had classes on public finance and budgeting. I have a master's in business administration. You know, we've had accounting classes and finance. So I'm trained in finance to a degree. I'm not a banker. I'm not a financial planner. I'm not a CPA. But I am comfortable in the financial realm. When I was a chief of staff of a unit, when I was a commander, we had yearly budgets. We operated off the fiscal calendar. Months leading up to the fiscal year, we would forecast requirements. We would have to present those requirements to our higher headquarters and argue on behalf. This was a yearly basis to get the resources that we need. Not every time did we get what we requested. You know, oftentimes it was less. But you know, and then after you get that allocation, you figure out how you're going to get the job done with the money that you had received. And so it's moving forward. You have sometimes weekly budget meetings to assess where you're at and communicate challenges to your higher headquarters. If there's something that's a priority of your boss, but you don't have it in your budget to meet, it's then, you know, you bring that up early and as early as possible. And so, you know, I've experienced that several times in the military. In my current role, we have a profit and loss statement we're working towards. You know, we have monthly finance meetings to see where we're at and to make sure we're, you know, controlling costs as much as possible.
Please describe some specific examples of how you have been able to remove barriers to collaboration and teamwork.
Yeah, I think that ties back to, you know, that servant leadership I aspire to be. You know, we have in the plant where I work, we have everyone has a specific job. And if they don't get that job done, other people are affected by it. And so sometimes the most basic obstacles people face is the ability to communicate their current situation with people that are adjacent to them. When I think of, and so we deal with that, you know, daily at the plant, is, you know, I need to be out there talking to people. They're so busy doing their job. Sometimes they don't have the time to report up when the problem exists until it's too late. So if I'm out there on the ground, listening, talking, seeing what's going on and tying it together, that's where we find efficiencies. When I think of the project and where there's going to be obstacles, it's going to occur along the seams. And what I mean by that is between when one contractor is working and another contractor is working, how are we communicating between those? Do they know what the impacts are of their project, and how are they tying in to their adjacent organization? And there's numerous places, whether it's within the P3, whether it's between the P3 and the authority, or the cities that are doing some of their, you know, levy work. between the Corps and any one of those entities. And then when I think of the project as well, the biggest, obstacle they're going to see coming up is a time of transition. Transitions and seams is where we're going to see the risk. And we have to plan early and often on these and think critically and come up with some creative solutions to make sure that we achieve our desired end state.
Tell us about a time when you were able to stand firm in your position without alienating others and eventually gain support for your position.
Yeah, recently my company went through a reorganization requiring us to reduce headcount, find some cost savings, and we did have to lay off, unfortunately, a couple of individuals. Those came with some really tough conversations. And so, as a site lead for my facility, I had to, I was getting forced to reach a certain percentage, and I had to, advocate for my team. It's easy to look at other entities. This site got this person and that site got that person. You guys probably see it here on the diversion where one county has something, another county has that, and is it fair or not? And what we have to understand is that we all come a different place, and we have to, work towards our mission, towards our goal. And so, as I got pressured to reach a certain percentage, I had to have an open and candid conversation with the team that was overseeing the transition. I had to explain my situation, kind of like I talked before about the situation with my boss. The team I was working with didn't have some of the information that I had, and I had to make sure that they understood it within the context of which, from their perspective. I got to understand that they got a big company to reorganize, and we have one of the highest producing seed plants in their division that, they got to understand where we're coming from. And it came through dialogue and making sure that they understood where we're coming from. And, I had to, not get emotional. I had to have a real calm approach that I accounted for my own biases and I understood theirs, and really have a mature approach to it.
Give an example of a situation in which you prepared a plan for a team that you led, which was not successful or not completed as planned. How did you deal with being unsuccessful, and what did you tell your team members?
Yeah, there's this is kind of a petty example, I guess, but there's in our OTC, there's a competition called Ranger Challenge that you train for, and it's once a year. It's like the sport for ROTC, and we had a team that won it one year, and they came back charging the next year thinking they were going to win again, and they did the same train up. They played their heart out and executed the best they could, and they still fell short. And after the fact, I self-reflected, and I thought, what else could have we done? Could have we done an extra 5 a.m. morning ruck? Could have we done some extra marksmanship training? And the cadets were really disappointed and heartbroken. And I told them though that what's the reason why we do this? Why do we play sports? Why do we go to these challenges? It's to experience the highs of victory and the lows of defeat, and being able to move forward through both of those scenarios and get better regardless of the situation. You can learn just as much from victory, and you probably learn as much from defeat, probably more from defeat. The truly, champions that are out there learn more from their defeats than they do their victory. And it comes to self-reflection, and it comes through being able to have a growth mindset and have a positive outlook. You know, I think about, I'm sure there's been some defeats out there on this project. But when we look at the grand scheme of it, when we look at on this tour, it is mind-blowing, the accomplishments we've made to get this project off the ground and going forward. It is awe-inspiring to get out there and see that. So, you know, sometimes a lot of organizations forget to reflect and celebrate their successes. They're so mission-driven that they got to take a step back and really appreciate what they have.
Tell us about a time when you had to convert a general strategy or vision into a detailed implementation plan. Describe your approach and the details of your plan.
Yeah, I mean, several times in my career, we've been given this plan to deploy overseas. And geez, the work behind that is quite intense. So you have to have a decision-making process, some sort of mission or goal analysis to get you there. So whether it's, you know, deploying to Eastern Europe in the deterrence of Russia, you know, we had our vision of getting out there to, in my case, we went to Poland initially, and, you know, you had to go out there and do reconnaissance of the site. You got to understand what's going on out there on the ground. You got to come back to your team and explain the situation, and sequence explain the situation and develop courses of action for you to consider. And then you got to troubleshoot those courses of action. And then you have to come up with a plan and break it down into pieces and phases to make sure that they're executable. These grand visions that we have, it's, you know, what do they say? It's like eating an elephant. You know, one bite at a time is how it's done. And so it can't happen overnight. And so you have to have steady leadership that's focused on the end objective, but accounts for the needs of the individuals and the teammates that are a part of it. And so that's my approach to those situations.
Tell us about the most important strategic decision you have ever made. How did you make your decision?
Strategic decision. So, you know, early in my career, of course, was tactical. My middle of my career in the military was operational, and then towards the end, we had some strategic level decisions that had to be made. You know, when you think about strategy, it's about looking long-term and sequencing events, accounting for second and third order effects and how they're going to affect your desired outcome. And so, you know, the most important one, I guess I think towards, you know, the livelihood of individuals and some of those, the safety of people and your desired end state. So I guess my mind goes towards, you know, some of those most tragic and distinct experiences that I've had, and, you know, and it's you know, whether your base is getting attacked by, you know, indirect fire, you know, the first thing is you get security. But, you know, what you have to do is protect the most important part, and it's surging to your strong points and communicating up and getting the resources that you need to accomplish, you know, defend your situation. So hope that answers the question, but a little tricky.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sundberg. So board members may have some follow-up questions for you, but we would like to also give you an opportunity to ask questions. The interview will end promptly at 3:20, so just so everybody is aware of the time allotment that we have. So with that, do you have any questions for us?
No, I mean, I've been on the tour, very thorough and done a great job by the team. I had some questions this morning at the, this early afternoon, the meet and greets, and you have an expert team of professionals that adequately done it. I guess, I understand that we're moving to, from the construction phase over to the operational phase. And, what do you guys see as as we go operationalize and we look at the diversion that's up in Winnipeg, is that something that you guys are trying to emulate? What's operating up in Winnipeg, or, how do you guys see the operationalizing of the diversion?
Well, I think that that's an excellent question. Obviously, Winnipeg has done a great job, but things are, we have a lot of unique qualities down here in the United States and in the Fargo-Moorhead, Cass and Clay, West Fargo entity or area as well. So I think that Winnipeg can provide us some really good examples and maybe some best practices, but we are going to take what's going to be applicable to our area and our communities. With operation and maintenance, that is, you're correct, that is where we will be transitioning in the next couple of years. And part of the new director's tasks will be to help us in that process as we fine tune what those operation and maintenance policies and protocols are going to be. None of it has been fully detailed yet.
Sure. Yeah, what are you guys most proud of that you've accomplished as a authority, as a board?
Well, speaking on behalf of the board, I think the fact that we have a board. I think the fact that we have 2 states, 3 cities, several watershed districts, 2 counties, that we all came together because we have a common mission, using some of the terminology that you are using. We have a common mission to make sure that we have reliable, permanent flood protection in the Fargo-Moorhead communities. We all got really tired of sandbagging and fighting floods together. And one of the things that we're very proud of in the larger metro area is the fact that we often do come together to combat issues and address issues as one community. And I think that that is probably one of the biggest things that we're proud of, that you have 13 board members from a multitude of jurisdictions, and we can put aside those differences and come together. I don't know if other board members have anything else to add to that. Mayor Mahoney.
It sounds like you're in a very successful position as it presently sits. Why would you want to take the headache of having 13 bosses and a project that has to be completed the next 2 years? What is driving you to want this job?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've thought about that. I have a really good job in West Fargo with great teammates, and I'm grateful for that. But since I've left the military about a little over a year ago, I've missed that sense of service, about being about something bigger than myself, helping solve the biggest challenges that face my community. That's kind of why that's why I was interested in this. And I feel like my experience of crisis management, of my education, it suits this role. I think it'd be a great challenge. I have an endless energy of positivity that I think I could bring to this project. And like you guys said, like this is a dynamic group and encompasses a lot of entities, public and private. And I think we learn as we work together that, as they say, we all do better when we all do better. And, this is a common, this threat of flood is common to all of us. And I just want to be part of that solution.
Commissioner Colbeck.
Me? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I thought-
Hi,
sorry.
Denise Kolpak again. Thank you for being here. I have a question. Communication with the public and transparency as this project continues, comes to completion, then to your point earlier, transitions to operations and maintenance. A big part of that and expectation of this job is working with the media as part of that communication and to communicate with the public. Can you please share your experience, how you would prepare and how you approach the idea of working with the media?
Yeah, I've had a little bit of training with the service on public relations. It's being leading with the facts, answering the questions that are asked. I'm a public servant, or I was in the service. I imagine it's the same in this capacity, where I'm here to get the job done. I think the board is the one who can give opinion. I'm going to give facts and give it to them straight. You guys have a great website and really, really good public social media presence. The fact that everything is, as I've applied and interviewed for this job, I've researched your website, and it's very thorough and timely with information. Nobody could say they don't know what's going on. They just have to open YouTube and watch this, as an example. So it's really about being open and transparent, and understand that the public is the customer. The taxpayers are the customer here.
I know one of the questions that had maybe come up earlier had to do with a little bit of Mayor Mahoney's question, that you would have 13 bosses. How would you envision communicating with the board of directors? And can you talk a little bit about the steps you would take to maintain that communication?
Yeah, I think I've read in your new bylaws that there are, I think, quarterly or monthly meetings based off of position that occur. I would, like to get to know each and every one of you and understand how you make decisions. Make sure that your constituents are being heard and that your viewpoints are being addressed. And then, providing some, within the, providing you guys the information that you need, and going back to the team with the, the authority to answer your questions, to make sure that you're fully informed, to make your decisions, and providing you very thorough and not just a recommendation, but also options, and trying to find win-win solutions. But it's through, candid conversations and being open and honest. And, I pride myself on having a really small ego, and I'm here to help and work. And, when you look at this project, this is really government at its best. It should be government at its best, providing the safety to the lives and livelihood of the 250,000+ people that live in the Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo area.
Thank you. Other board members have questions? Do you have any more questions, Mr. Summer?
No, ma'am.
All right. All right, well, with that, we will conclude the interview, and thank you so much for participating in the process and for coming here today and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And we'll be in recess for 10 minutes. Well, thank you, Mr. Lambert, for coming today, flying all the way from Louisiana to participate in this interview. We're hoping that you enjoyed the tour yesterday and the meet and greet this morning, so that you're aware of who all is here today. On the Metro Flood Diversion Authority, we will go around the room and give you some introductions. We do have one individual who is missing today, one of our Cass County Commissioners, but the rest of us are here today. So I am Shelley Carlson. I'm the Moorhead Mayor, but this year I'm also the Chair of the Metro Flood Diversion Authority, and I'll turn it to my left to get started.
Mr. Lambert, good afternoon. I'm Vice Chair of the FM Diversion Authority and Cass County Commissioner.
Hi, I'm
Tony
Mary.
Grinberg, I'm sorry.
I'm Mary Sherling and a Cass County Commissioner.
I welcome Denise Kolpak, Fargo City Commission.
Welcome, Kevin Campbell, Clay County Commission.
Larry Seldrold, City of Moorhead, also a bow tie wearer, and so I'm a little disappointed that you didn't, but, no.
David Ebinger, Clay County Commissioner.
Dave Pepcorn, Fargo City Commission.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lambert. Bernie Dardis, Mayor of West Fargo.
Rick Steen, member of the Cass County Joint Water Board.
Tim Mahoney, Mayor of Fargo.
Chuck Henderson, Morton City Council.
And that is all of us. So we have a number of questions for you, but I will be turning that over to Ms. Tracy Peters, who's the Cass County Assistant Director and Director of Cass County HR.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So before I start with questions, Mr. Lambert, I just want to give you a little idea of the time frame. We have about 15 questions, and we've allotted about 50 minutes. So just to give you an idea of how you might want to allocate your time for those questions, okay? All right.
Turn my mic on just to be ready.
Pardon me?
I just turned my mic on just to let you know.
Okay. You received a scenario last week regarding the information provided to you from your engineering director and issues arising with the contractor. Describe to us your thought process, analysis, and how you would use your management style and communication skills to resolve the hypothetical exercise and engage with various stakeholders.
Okay. So I did send that to myself. Do you mind if I refer to it, my answer? Is that okay with the? I did rank it in a manner that was a priority. So the very first bullet, if you remember, was an opinion from the general counsel of the authority. So also, I looked up some of the codes and rules and statutes for the state of North Dakota on procurement, on human resource related rules, et cetera. And then try to lay out a strategy that would respect and comply with the general counsel's position, while at the same time inform the authority and have the interface with the authority about how to handle a situation like that, including with the media. So we could go through each one, or how do
It's up to you how you'd like to answer the question. So you go ahead with whatever you'd like there.
Well, I did rank it in sort of a priority. So the very first thing was the contractual position. And then the second thing was about managing the hearsay and the behavior of the contractor. And then addressing the concerns of the staff who were on the receiving end of this contractor. And what would the rules related to that? And then the last bullet of that very first section about recommendations for future work by this contractor and how to document the performance of the work under his current contract and how that could disqualify him for future work with the authority. And then I went through some recommended, steps, how to communicate with the contractor and how to address the staff concerns and then the public aspect of it. That's my answer in completeness.
All right, thank you. Please describe your last position and tell us what you liked best about the job.
So the last position I ran benefit cost analysis for all FEMA-funded projects. So it could be disaster-related under the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, or it could be competitive under the non-disaster grant program. A lot of times, and the project types were either drainage improvement, it could be a building with a roof retrofit for hurricane wind, it could be just every type of project you can imagine. And we also evaluated and scored the BRIC and FMA applications every year. And so a lot of times these applications, the foundation of them are engineering related. So in the case of drainage, the foundation of it would be the H&H model. And then a lot of times it depends on where they were. You could have plans and specs and other deliverables. If it was phased, you would just have a claim based on NFIP claims and individual assistance claims. And we would run a BCA on that. And then we would run a BCA for construction, and that's when the H&H would be ready and, all of the other deliverables to go to construction. What I would do primarily would ground truth the work, the H&H work, was one of the focuses I had. We were managing about 1,500 projects, somewhere in the area of $5 billion in funding. And so the largest project was a levee lift project at $75 million. So they were a variety of projects that I managed for the state. And just so you understand, we have 64 parishes in our state, which are counties, and about 40 of them have the applications in. So I would have to deal with the local government and their consultants, and a lot of times when there were complaints about how long it would take to get funding to flow back down, they would have what they called congressional inquiries into FEMA. And then you would have the congressional delegation on our conference calls with the local governments. That was a common tactic for the local governments to try to speed up the process. And it was effective.
All right. What would you consider to be the skills that are necessary to be an effective executive director? And how would you bring your specific skills to the executive director position?
So, I've said this in the sessions today. I toured the project, and it's a well-run operation. I've been tracking the project for 10 years. And as y'all know, one of my positions was with one of the firms, and I was involved in writing sections of the proposal for that team that won the project. But that all ended in 2017, and I had a great deal of, exuberance to see these structures finally get built. It was just wonderful to see. And I was involved in talks with the Corps because the Corps wanted to use the Fargo project as a pilot right after the WRDA 2014 bill was passed and bring that around to other parts of the country. That's how I got involved as far as from the ASCE standpoint, the American Society of Civil Engineers. We held a workshop in St. Paul, and then we did one in New York, and we did one in New Orleans, and one in the Bay Area of California. So, I have some understanding and history of the project that I feel would be advantageous to me. One of the questions that came up today, and I'll repeat my answer, is that I'm somewhat detached at the same time, because you have people that have been involved in the project much longer than me and at a much higher level of detail. And there's always politics at every level, especially a very large project like this. And that could be a blessing for me, or it could be a curse. I don't know which one it would be, but I stated that earlier, that I am detached from all that because I don't have that history. And I know I'm aware of what that is, because I live that in my own state. And everything can be political at some point in a project like this. And the project has had its challenges, and you all have overcome it. So to go back to, those are the things that I feel like I could bring that would be of interest. The end result of the project is to get a letter of map revision and reduce the flood zone that the project is, that's the purpose and need of the project. And so every FEMA grant that I worked on at closeout, if it's a drainage improvement, has a requirement to file a LOMAR at closeout. Not to get approval, but to file for it. So that would be exciting to be a part of that as well. Some of the other things that I feel could be useful is, because I worked in Louisiana where there was a lot of heavy civil works, came into the tail end of the hurricane storm damage risk reduction system with the firm I was working for when we proposed on this project. They turned those assets over to the authority down there. And you all, it may be beneficial to go visit those authorities, because they have a flood protection system that was built primarily under the federal procurement, and then turned over to the local sponsor, the state, the state's flood authorities. There's one on the east side of the river and one on the west side. So those are the sort of things that might be some fresh air that can be brought into a new transition for the project as it moves toward completion.
Describe to us your experience with implementing public sector HR policies and procedures.
Well, I've worked for all kinds of public works entities, and we have to adhere to the HR policy. Every company, it's been on the private side, under contract with different levels of government, local, state, federal, have to abide by HR, laws, so that people can work together without having a conflict that gets spun up to a level that could be classified as harassment or some kind. So I'm very familiar with that in the private sector.
Establishing a new vision often meets with strong resistance. Provide an example that best illustrates your ability to overcome others' resistance to new ideas and directions.
Well, one of the unique experiences of the last position I held was that I was acting as an extension of staff to the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, which is the state FEMA arm. That's where all the FEMA funds flow through. And over the last year, I was part of a team to revise the standard operating procedure on how they manage the funding, the grant applications, et cetera. And there is resistance to change when something is done for, a decade, say, the last time they did a revision. So I would say that it's important to have workshops and vet all of the different ways of going about that, especially if it's a standard operating procedure. And let everybody have a voice in the process. And then you build consensus that way, and then you can move forward with a new procedure or policy.
How would a subordinate describe your leadership or management style?
What was the first part of the question? I'm sorry.
How would a subordinate
Oh,
describe your leadership or management style?
well, this gets back to the previous question. I think that if you have standard operating procedures and an HR, policy, when people understand what their job is and their job description, I feel that micromanaging is not always a welcomed, tactic. To let people do their job and to rely on the procedures that are in place. But that does need to be balanced with the interpersonal relationship with the member of staff. So I would say that I would be viewed as supportive and also always there when called upon. But some people do not have the same competency level as others, and that has to be either, improved, or some action has to be taken, and you have to follow the guidance on how to deal with that particular staff member. So that's an important part of managing people. I mean, I feel like if a person is passionate about their work, they're going to take the initiative. And all of the procedures and the policies are really they're not relevant to that person because they excel. But some people are not like that, and we have to fall back on that written procedure or policy.
Being part of being a leader is the ability to remove obstacles that stand in the way of your employees' success in executing a plan or assignment. Tell us about a time that you were the most proud of your ability to remove obstacles.
So in the last position, a lot of times, either people on staff at the state or at the parish county level were not able to get a project over the threshold of being cost effective. In the BCA world, that just means the benefit cost ratio has to be greater than 1-to-1 for the project to be cost effective. And every federal project has to have a BCR, benefit cost ratio, of greater than 1. So they just lacked, a lot of times they lacked a foundation to try to understand how to bring the benefits into that process. And again, I going back to if they were passionate, even though they may not know or understand a H&H model or the tools that are used to calculate a benefit cost ratio, if they had the initiative and they asked for help, I would always step up because it's exciting to keep every project funded in those portfolios, whether it be HMGP, BRIC, FMA, in that world that I was working in. And so there were many times where we had projects that go back to Hurricane Katrina that were a grant that go back to that hurricane, and we pulled them out of the ditch, if you would, and got them approved by FEMA. And it was exciting to do that because not only were the sub-applicants very heavy, the public was, the stakeholders, and the state itself was very happy about that.
Sometimes we find ourselves at odds with positions that may be strongly held by key figures in the organization. Tell us about a time when you had to tactfully disagree with a key figure to avoid escalating conflict. What did you say or do?
So, and prior to my last position, I worked on river diversions in Louisiana. I initially worked on them from 2003 to 2005 as part of the Barataria Basin model that I was working with the firm that was doing the modeling for that basin. And there was a river diversion in that basin. And then I came back to it in 2013 when I worked for Ben C. Gerwick, which was part of COE, and became COE North America after a few years. And I led the independent technical review of 4 river diversions that are controversial in Louisiana. They're all based in Plaquemines Parish, which is a county like you all use in that term, in the very lowest part of the river. We always say at the end of the earth. But the problem is that the river, when it goes into these estuaries, it will completely inundate it with river water, and it will kill dolphins and oysters and run brown shrimp out, and the whole water column will be impacted. And so once we concluded the independent technical review of those river diversions, COE went after the design of one of the projects and was not selected. So they chose to close the office in Louisiana. I'm gonna get to my answer. But within 2 weeks, I was picked up by the CMAR team. It was under the name Louisiana Diversion Company. And I worked with them for 2 years, teaching the contractors on that team what the river diversion was doing and how they were going to construct it. I was the technical advisor to that team. And then I also, going back to many of the issues you've already raised, I went to church with the parish president. He was a friend at church, that's all. I would ask him questions about the project, and he would get very nervous because he told me at some point, he knew I was involved in them, that his base was 100% against the projects. And I had been working on the projects. And I responded back to him, I said, well, you need to write a letter and ask all of those decision makers to come down to your, I said, very simple, cinder block, humble office. They're all over the place. And they have models, and it's very intimidating for a rural parish like his to have these people descend upon him. And he did. And he did have them come. I ended up writing that letter because he was struggling with that. And the day that they came down, and they had general counsel of NOAA, because the waiver for this project for dolphins had just passed Congress. And the state sent drillers to the site with troopers, state police, and they drilled on the site without a permit, which he rejected based on an ordinance that his council had passed. And at that point, I told him I would write every letter for him. And it was a difficult decision for me. And I did write 30 letters for him opposing the project based on the impacts of the way it was being designed. Fast forward, today the project is stopped. He is gone, I am gone, but none of the laws are gone. None of the realities of the impacts are gone. There's litigation in Louisiana and in federal court in DC. They've spent $500 million and they're stopped. And it goes back to when I was writing the letters, I told them, I said, you want to try to keep it to 2 pages and keep the emotion out of the letters and just lay out your position of why the project would be detrimental to your parish and how they didn't respect the local laws related to building those projects. And anyway, I think that it was a high profile, there was press involved and all that, and I just, I don't regret it. It was the right thing to do, and now they're having to do a redesign of that project. And they are looking at some of the solutions that we laid out in those letters. And so that felt fulfilling to me, even though it was a difficult, stressful time. I hope that answers my question, your
Yes,
question.
thank you, thank you. Describe the most difficult or challenging work-related problem that you have solved. What was your approach for analyzing and solving the problem?
Well, that was one of them. That was a big one. And I just want to say that, just to follow up on that last answer, was that just in the paper in the last few days, and it's in the Associated Press, that the trustees of the board that funded the project that I'm speaking about is asking for their money back if they don't get answers. $3 billion from the state of Louisiana. So it's a serious issue. And I am proud of the fact that the state has now finally addressed the local concerns, and they are going through the process of many of the things that we laid out in the letters. So I'll just leave that there. Now, in the last position that I was in, I'm going to go back to a previous answer too. There were many projects that were stuck that go back to Katrina. They had projects, they had a 1,000-year event in the Baton Rouge area. They call it a 1,000-year event. That's how much flooding went on around primarily the Meat River. And they had grants. That was in 2016. And I started in 2020, and many of those grants were stuck. And they have all been approved over the last 4.5 years and are all on their way. And there were 2 different disasters. One was in the Baton Rouge area, and the other was in other parts of the state. And the people that I was working with in the governor's office in Louisiana would attest to the fact that I fought tooth and nail with FEMA to get those projects approved. And happy to provide you all any of those as a reference. They were very grateful for the work that I did for them.
Describe your experience with financial data. How proficient are you with financial data? Provide an example that illustrates your proficiency.
So, I mean, benefit cost analysis is financial analysis of a project. A lot of times we would have to look at budgets for certain BCAs. We'd have to look at operating budgets. We'd have to look at maintenance budgets, not just the construction cost of the project. We would have to look at these other parts to be able to complete a BCA for a particular project. And the state of Louisiana in that program used 4 different platforms to track the funding. They had their own platform. They called it, first it was called LAHM, Louisiana Hazard Mitigation, and then it became GOSEP grants. So it was a stepwise process to track cost on a particular project. They had their own cost line, framework. And then you had several FEMA platforms that you also had to track the projects. And then ultimately, at that level where I was, I do a lot of exporting into Excel and work with numbers that way. So if you have an accounting software or other, platforms that allow that kind of export, those are the kind of tools that I would use just to grab what I need to pull out and evaluate the numbers, whatever that may be.
Please describe some specific examples of how you have been able to remove barriers to collaboration and teamwork.
I'll go back to the last position. One of the analysts that was running BCAs for the state had created a difficult relationship with the analysts for FEMA. And they couldn't get anywhere with their work. So what I did when I got in, sometime after about 6 months, I set up a biweekly call with the FEMA staff and the GOSEP staff. And we went through every project du jour, if you would. I mean, we had 1,500 projects, but we would be working on, a subset on a biweekly basis, maybe 20 or 30 projects. And I find that this was right in the beginning of the pandemic. All of it was new. I think the fact that that occurred allowed us to be collaborative on a Teams call, primarily as the platform we use. So they also, at the time, were using Zoom quite a bit. But we turned the relationship around. Again, I think that I could provide you any backup for that, because it really was a relationship that was not in good shape when I started. And just that one action changed the relationship, because we developed a relationship with them, and not just as a submitter and a reviewer sort of relationship. It was more collaborative. And we did this also with other sections. In this last year in New Orleans, they have, in the FMA program, they have a lot of historic properties, as you can imagine, in New Orleans. And they have applied for elevation grants, and they have to get SHPO clearance. And so the SHPO group out of FEMA Region 6 was not cooperating with the state SHPO team or the City of New Orleans SHPO team. So I used the same tactic. I had us set up a biweekly call, and before you know it, we had 30 approvals. It just started flowing, and just being accessible and available. I'm not sure why things lock up, and sometimes it's not relevant. What's important is to move forward and not stay in that space, and try to find a way to do that.
Tell us about a time when you were able to stand firm in your position without alienating others and eventually gain support for your position.
I think that the river diversions is the big one for me. I read the C.S. Lewis quote often, and that was, everybody's running to the cliff, and there's one person running the other way, and they say he's the madman. And the red line for me, it was like an alarm system went off when they got the waiver from the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And that allowed them to move forward with a design that would wipe out the entire population of dolphins in Barataria Bay, 2,500 dolphins. And, it was difficult because I was alone in many ways, the only one that would work with the parish to help them defend themselves. And now there's a new governor, and there's a whole new leadership with the authority in Louisiana that's managing that project. And they are listening to the parish. And it's just a wonderful thing to see, and they have acknowledged that the parish is right. So now they have to work out a solution. I'm not part of that, but there's remnants of that in the correspondence that I helped draft. So again, that was a difficult thing because it was very popular to be on a multi-billion-dollar project in Louisiana. Dozens of consultants, it was a difficult time, but I persevered.
Give an example of a situation in which you prepared a plan for a team that you led, which was not successful or not completed as planned. How did you deal with being unsuccessful, and what did you tell your team members?
Well, in the world that I've been in, really my whole working life is submitting proposals. So one of them, I think the river diversions are, that's the big part of, they're big jobs, they're signature jobs, they're multi-billion-dollar heavy civil works jobs. And we lost the design of the mid-Barataria sediment diversion. And that was, it was difficult. I mean, that ultimately was my demise. I had to walk away and move on. And in that case, it was within 2 weeks, they closed the office and let me go. And within 2 weeks of that, the CMAR team picked me up. And then we pursued that very same project for the CMAR contract, and we lost. And so I was, I was watching Fargo at the time, and I was sharing with Chris that, or maybe it was Robert. I was let go in August of 2017 from COE, and then I think in November of 2017, the permanent cease and desist on the Fargo project was issued. And so it was, I've been compassionate about this kind of work because throughout my family history, we have touched this kind of work where, I don't know if I even shared this, but my third great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather was the president of the Second Draining District in New Orleans, and they debated whether to divert the river back then. That was before the Civil War, and then I got involved. I studied them in graduate school at Tulane, and then I got involved 20 years ago, off and on over the last 20 years. So anyway, I wasn't sure what the fate was of doing a project like that. I was sharing earlier too that like the Hoover Dam, when they built the Hoover Dam, they didn't have all these laws and everything that we have today. Just like in New Orleans, they built the Bonacary Spillway in the 30s, and they didn't have any of the laws you have to follow today. So anyway, I have overcome those losses, and I have persevered. I've stayed on track. The team I was working with on the Mid-Breton, the CMAR team, did win that project. And then I moved on. I was going to work with the state of Mississippi, which then led me to the last position that I had. But, and here I am today, in front of you as a candidate for this project. And, I have stayed focused, and, I feel like there's a reason why things happen. It's bigger than me. So I'll leave it at that.
Tell us about a time when you had to convert a general strategy or vision into a detailed implementation plan. Describe your approach and the details of your plan.
So to go back to the previous position, we had a lot of projects that were stuck, and so we had to implement strategies to try to get the FEMA Region 6 staff engaged. And we did that, and we're successful in getting those projects unstuck. It really was simple action. It wasn't really detailed oriented in that regard. It was just some simple interpersonal relationship building to get the projects. Then we could get into the details of what was wrong with those projects. There were many of them. One of them that comes to mind, and it wasn't that it was a large project. It was an $8 million drainage project. When the Mississippi River and Tributary Program was funded and the 1928 flood bill, okay, they built these levees all along the river system. And what it did is it also cut off some of these tributaries, and that allowed drainage to flow into the tributary system. The larger part of the tributary. So there was a project up in Concordia Parish that was funded under Katrina that was stuck for 10 years. I'm surprised that it didn't go to a denial. And it was a small scale diversion. They basically were building box culverts at the end of this particular tributary to drain the water into the Tensas River, which is a river that's adjacent to the Mississippi River, because they created a bowl. They had a back levee and the river levee, and they had to get the water out. And so that project was finally approved. It went to construction during the pandemic, during the chain supply disruptions and inflation. So it came in $4 million higher. So there we were faced within 2 weeks of the award to have to run a BCA again in order to keep the contractor on that job. And we did, and we got it approved. And then they came back again for more money because of unforeseen conditions, because the set of plans and specs laid dormant for so long. So but anyway, the project is being constructed today. And it took persistence and the ability to, readily resolve the conflict with FEMA on cost effectiveness while there were changes to the budget and the scope as well.
Tell us about the most important strategic decision you have ever made. How did you make your decision?
I got to go back to the river diversions again, and that was, I just did not think, I thought it was inhumane to go to Congress and stick a waiver in a budget bill, to proceed with the project, unbridled. And as an engineer, if you have the Marine Mammal Protection Act was passed, I think, in 1972. It's like a major environmental tenet. It was done in the Republican Nixon administration. So was NEPA. And all of those things are important. If you're going to design a project, you should comply with these tenets. And that is more exciting to me, to implement a project that has to conform to all these rules and then have it be effective and operational. Anyway, I believe that was it was a watershed moment for me to stand up to the world that I was in, to defend this little rural parish where these big, heavy civil works projects were being planned, and they were not at the table. And it had an impact on my career. I had to make changes because I was working with all of the people that were in that circle of working on those jobs. And I felt, I know that I did the right thing because they're finally being treated with respect. And they're going to work out something. They've been negotiating for the last 3-4 months and paused all the litigation to come up with a compromise. That, you know, it's not like exactly like Fargo, but it's similar, like the judge stated, that the project has merit, but the impacts also equally have merit, and go find a compromise to make it work.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Lambert. So the board members may have some follow-up questions, but we want to first give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you have. So do you have any questions for us?
No, ma'am.
All right, I will turn to our board. Any questions?
When this project was first presented to Congress, we had a cost-benefit ratio of less than 2.5. When you did your analysis, how did we slip through?
So when I was the chair of the P3 committee, we did a little report on this. The Corps at the time in 2016, these are 2016 numbers, they were managing $268 billion in assets. That's their portfolio. They had a $100 billion backlog in O&M and a $60 billion backlog, which is now over a $100 billion backlog in new projects, and they only get $5 billion a year. So you have to have it, of course, cost-effective for federal authorization, greater than 1-to-1, but it's really not considered competitive in that pool of money until it's over a 3.5. And I think, you know, like in New Orleans, they deepened the river and they had a BCR of about 10-to-1, and they were quickly funded. So the higher, you know, your BCR is. Now, in the BCA world, sometimes you talk about cooking the numbers too. You know, you have to be careful to not overstate the benefits, because then your credibility is challenged. But that's what my answer would be, is that yes, you were cost effective, and yes, you were at 2.5-to-1, but you really needed to get to 3.5. And I'm sure today, now they have, you know, the OMB pass nature-based has to be quantified in every BCA for every federal project. And I'm sure that we could get a BCR greater than 2.5 today for your project.
Thank you, Mayor Mahoney, and thank you, Mr. Lambert. Any other board members have questions?
I have one, thank you. So similar to your river diversion example, communication on this project with the public is extremely important, you know, through construction to completion and then operations and maintenance. Can you share your experience working with the media, how you prepare your approach, and kind of your philosophy about working with the media for communication?
Going back to those days that I was writing the letters, and at times I was quoted in the paper, and I also was interviewed by a local news station. I just, the way that I would handle it, I was not really working for an authority, okay? So it was not like I was in a chain of command. I was able to speak freely. It would be different as an executive director. I wouldn't speak freely without the permission of the authority. And of course, that would have to be constructed and vetted to the approval of the authority and whoever else the authority delegates that responsibility to. It could be a general counsel issue, it could be the social media public relations firm, Neon, or any number of people could be, or all could be involved in what the script ought to be. But going back to those days, I just, you know, I relied on my intuition about what the right side ought to be. And I think that, I don't think anybody in here would be in favor of killing one dolphin, much less 2,500 dolphins that live in a bay. And even whether they lived there forever or just in the last few hundred years, it's still one of those things that it's, like I said, a watershed moment that you have to take a position. But I was careful not to say anything too derogatory because there were so many people, there were lots of people that were on the attack because they wanted that project approved. And there was a lot of money involved in the project. And like I said, today, now there's consequences to not having addressed that. And they're dealing with that and the press. But that would be my answer back to you, is that in this situation, in this position, there would be clear direction about what I should say in a public venue.
Thank you. And that will conclude our interview with you today. So thank you very much for coming up here. And again, hope you enjoyed the community, and just wish you safe travels back to Louisiana.
Thank you. It was nice to meet all of you, and it was an honor. Thank you.
All right.
She caught it. Usually.
Okay. What was that? Yeah. All right. So that concluded the three interviews of the finalists that we had. And there is going to be a presentation done by the individuals who did the OmniView report. I'm looking to see if Michael or Robert are in the room or available, because I think that is going to be done virtually. Or do you know?
Yes, they should have City of Fargo set up a link for them to connect with us here.
They're not on yet? Okay. They're scheduled for 4:30, so why don't we take a break for 5 minutes and come back at 4:28, and we'll get started. The next component that we have undertaken for the interviews, or the executive director position, is having an OmniView report completed with each of the candidates. And we have John Reynolds from OmniView online. And Mr. Reynolds, if you could maybe just give kind of a general overview of what the reports are that you bring to the table in these types of decision-making items, and then you could go through each of the candidates.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Hello, everybody. It's good to be with you today. My name is John Reynolds. I'm the CEO of OmniView. Also with me is Pat Howenstein, who is our Chief Science Officer and lead biopsychologist. We'll be walking you through the deck that I think is being shown right now here in a minute. OmniView is a long-established executive assessment company that's located in Minneapolis. We've been around for quite a while. We're originally part of Personnel Decisions International, and then split off about 12 years ago. We do a ton of leadership assessment work in just about every industry you can think of, including government, which we have a lot of experience in. And to the question of the kind of assessment, what we try to do is we try to provide you with pretty good sort of deep leadership data that's hard to get from an interview or a resume. So we're looking at factors that people possess that give us clues about the strength of their sort of leadership traits, and what level of leadership effectiveness we might expect given the data that we're looking at. So multiple data components that we'll share with you today. We're going to do it in sort of a summary format, and we're going to do a lot of side-by-side comparisons so you can kind of see the three candidates in the multiple sort of data components that we pulled. We're also going to show you a summary, an individual summary of each candidate, where we typically take all of the data and we have our IL psychologists sort of summarize what the data really means, just to kind of help you say, because we're going to show you a lot of stuff today, but the summary will sort of say, given everything you've seen, here's what you can kind of expect. We aren't going to make a call on here's who you should hire. We are going to give you a lot of great information and insight to help equip you to make a good decision. I think we can get going, and I think we're going to try to go through the data relatively quickly. Stop us if you have questions, and we're certainly going to stick around after the presentation of the data is done to answer questions as well. Anything else that I need to cover before we start?
Nope, but I just do think it's important to recognize that you did meet with myself and the vice chair and our two co-executive directors and the HR director to get a little bit more information about the organizational structure of the Metro Flood Diversion Authority and some of the culture that we have within the authority and the different types of relationships that we're looking at making sure that the executive director is able to establish and maintain, along with the job description, and then you utilize that information as well.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. So what we do is sort of an initial discovery phase when we go into these types of assignments. We try to uncover as much detail as we can about the role, what the dynamics of the role are, what the culture is going to, that they're going to be working in, what that looks like. And then from that, we actually build a custom assessment profile in our system. And once that profile is built, we're able to email that in a link format to candidates and have them complete a number of exercises that are aligned to the profile of that role. So as we're looking at this executive director, that's a custom role that we built based on all the information we got up front. So it is these results are not just sort of general leadership results. They are results based on your role that you're looking to hire for.
All right, thank you. And we do see your slide deck up, so you can begin.
All right, excellent. I'm going to try to go to full slide here, and I guess when I do that, I will lose sight of you all. So please stop me. Can you still see the deck okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So going through this, we're going to look at all three candidates side by side, and we're going to kind of start with two slides that talk about sort of the general findings. And we're going to do it on a sort of comparison basis. And the first thing that we were able to do is all the data we pulled, kind of pull that into one overall fit score that you can see for the job. And in this case, Pat, I'm going to defer to you to give the color commentary here. All three actually from a job fit perspective did quite well and certainly bring some pretty good strengths to the table that would be valuable.
John,
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you because the slide wasn't advancing.
No, it isn't.
Was not. Okay. How about now?
There you go.
Yep.
Okay. If I do this, can you see the slide?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to start with the overall job fit of the three candidates. And Pat, why don't you kind of walk them through what's comprised in those numbers?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. This is a multi-perspective assessment with quite a few elements, and each element is determined to have a degree of match with the requirement of the job. Accumulating all those different elements results in an overall job fit score. We consider these numbers to be quite high. Our minimum threshold is actually at 61%. So these are all quite good. The standard error of measurement is plus or minus 2. So you should look at the 82% for Jason Benson and the 83% for Dennis Lambert as being essentially equivalent, but significantly higher than the total job fit for Daniel Sundberg. Good news is all three candidates have a good job fit index, and two of them are essentially tied with one still high, but below the other two.
So whoever did the sourcing did a good job, we would say, right, Pat?
Exactly. Good news.
Yeah. And I guess I'm going to advance this way just to make sure you guys are all seeing it. Did that go to the next culture fit?
Yes, it did.
Great. So same thing here. We're doing sort of a consolidated view for you to look at all the factors associated with culture and how well they will fit culture. And Pat, again, we've got a little bit of its distinction here, but all of them performed fairly well. Maybe you can give them a little insight on the culture fit metric as well.
Yeah, the culture fit is determined by the level of agreement between a candidate's ideal culture, what they consider to be their ideal culture, and the realities as defined by stakeholders within the client organization. The expected kind of percentage is a bit higher with culture fit. These are still, higher numbers, but the standard error, if you will, or the deviation variance in the scores is a bit narrower. So there's actually more of a difference between the 69 and the 75 than what you might think. It would indicate that Dennis has got a very good culture fit. Jason and Daniel both have areas or certain cultural elements that are at odds, and we'll review those with you later. But it does suggest there's some cultural aspects that may produce some friction or some frustration for both Jason and Daniel.
So one of the things we want to start out with just is give you a little bit of the highlights that came out of that analysis and just some of the keys that we'll want you to consider when you're making your decision in terms of the culture fit for the three candidates. And Pat, maybe you can take them through the individual insights here and what they sort of mean.
Sure. Starting with Jason, that strong desire for a collaborative team-based culture is quite extreme. It's like every element of that type of culture was deemed to be critical for Jason. And the realities were, less pronounced than he would have liked in his ideal world. So he potentially would have some frustration if the level of collaboration and teamwork is less than what is ideal. Doesn't like unpredictability, overly fluid, so an agile type of dynamic culture is not desired. So that high collaboration, high teamwork, very pronounced, and then prefers more of a structured, highly disciplined kind of culture. Dennis had the higher fit, and there was a good alignment in terms of his preference for collaboration and the realities. He also had a lower preference for the agile, dynamic kind of culture, would prefer more disciplined, structured kind of environment, and certainly didn't want a highly unpredictable or fluid work environment. So more structure than perhaps that is going to be there. Daniel Sundberg also had some conflicts. There were very strong preference for collaboration, similar to Jason, as being critical components that they're looking for. There are also, interestingly, some elements of a performance-based culture that were highly desired by Daniel, being held accountable, being pushed on results and things like that. A lot of feedback and pressure, if you will, would be more characteristic of a performance-based culture. And there was a preference for that type of culture beyond what would be provided. So it's kind of like his idea would be high management control and strong loyalty of the team and collaboration and teamwork. So all of them had a good fit with the culture generally, but Jason desires more collaboration that may be present. Daniel, as well as having some aspects of a performance-based culture, desired that may not be present.
So we'll stop there for a second and ask if there's any questions on the actual culture fit component so far.
Nope, no, I don't see anybody who has any questions, so you can move on.
All right. The next area we're going to cover then is really just the individual summary write-ups. And in this component, we take a look at, we ask the IO psychologist to take a look at all the data collected and provide sort of a one-pager on strengths and then potential concerns based on what the data is saying. And that's what we're going to go to right now. And Pat, we'll start with Jason and sort of go over. And one other note I want to make here is the two primary data components that we're going to be talking about are in blue there. So personality data, which is how they look through the lens of a norm-based leadership effectiveness personality assessment. And then secondly, how they look through the lens of leadership experience factors that have a high corresponding impact on leadership effectiveness. Other data collected will show up in the third bucket here. So Pat, you can certainly expand on that and maybe take us through the Jason highlights.
Sure, I'd be glad to. So looking at Jason, first at the congruence between his predispositions and kind of the demands of the job. He had strengths in areas that would suggest, getting along with others. His strengths were in cooperation, diplomacy, and self-control. Brings a lot of energy to the job. However, if you look at the potential concern, he had the lowest overall predisposition to leadership roles in multiple areas. So he had those areas that were strong in the upper half of the norm distribution for other leaders at this level, but many of the others were in the lower 50% and lower half of the distribution. It means that his preferences and behavioral predispositions are less in line with other people, other leaders at this level. Adaptability, initiative, influence, and achievement, those are all quite relevant for the role. And it brings a question, if this is not something he's predisposed to, doesn't particularly like, perhaps as much as some of the more technical aspects of the project, will there be sufficient attention to leadership issues? And of course, I bring these concerns up because you have an opportunity to explore these people further. So that would be a question that you would want to be on the alert for. Within the experiences, and as John mentioned, we're kind of unique. This is a norm-based leadership experience inventory that we developed, and it's been around for a while now with great norms. So we're able to compare their foundational experience compared to other leaders. And of course, that foundational experience is what they can draw on to face new challenges and similar situations. Jason has a strong background with exceptional experience compared to other leaders in external relationships. He also has strong finance and project experience, all good things. On the lower side, there was moderate, not low, but moderate experience in introducing change and providing strategic direction. And these are areas that you would like to see a bit more pronounced for this type of role. And the question is, does he have sufficient experience to leverage and facing the new challenges? One other area that was low was turnarounds and fix-its, experience in those kind of scenarios. He was at the 36th percentile. And I really can't comment. You would have to take that into account as to whether there are aspects of the role that he's being placed or potentially placed into that could be characterized as a fix-it opportunity or a turnaround. To the extent that they exist, he's not going to be bringing as much experience to bear on handling that kind of issue. Some of the other areas to be aware of that are relevant, he's a very bright individual. Especially abstract reasoning, which has to do with being able to see trends and patterns and see relationships among seemingly disparate information. It's the type of reasoning that's applied in strategic thinking, and it's a very important quality. Single best predictor for success across all positions is mental abilities, and he's quite high in the abstract reasoning. His motivation pattern, self-reported, was interesting. He's very motivated by job recognition. getting that big job done. And he indicated that he's willing to make frequent sacrifices in order to make that happen. On the kind of the lower areas of other concerns, if you look at the personality constructs, they tend to cluster into kind of personality constructs that have something in common. And one of the, we call them acumen areas, one of those areas is called results acumen, which is a kind of predispositions that ideally a leader would have to drive results. And he had a lower standing in that acumen area, which includes initiative, persistence, achievement, orientation. And another area to explore perhaps a bit further in your contact would be, are they willing and able to drive results, really looking at past experiences and getting results and making parallels to the current situation. The other thing to make note of is he had low curiosity and openness to ideas and innovation scores. So you're probably looking at someone a bit more traditional and concrete perhaps in their thinking around solutions. And if you need and are looking for thinking outside the box, not necessarily predisposed to that type of thinking. Now, one thing that I'll stop here and let you ask questions, but we do have kind of a summary on Jason on the next slide, where maybe we can go there, John, and then I can entertain questions around either slide.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let me just add one thing here. What we were trying to do here is give you sort of the highlights and the potential concerns for each of the individuals. And then I just want to say where you see those question marks, those were recommended areas for further potential exploration by you as you get into the deeper interview process here. So we were trying to provide you with that. And on the first one here, when we talk about leadership issues, we're drawing a distinction between the skill as a leader of a team versus the knowledge of the and the leader of the functional work that team does. We're sort of made the assumption that you pick three people that understand the work and understand the function of the work. We're trying to say, okay, they know the job, but how strong are they in leading a team to accomplish what needs to be accomplished?
Yeah.
So the next thing we try to provide, we kind of call it the BOLO report. So we just try to say, if you go in this direction, be on the lookout for these types of things, and kind of our nod to our favorite crime shows, I guess. But just try to give you a little bit of hints around things to be on the lookout for, and potentially coaching opportunities for these candidates. So Pat, this is sort of the coaching thing to be on the lookout for Jason.
Yeah,
John?
it's
Oh,
kind of a
John and
summary
Pat?
of the.
John and
Yeah.
Pat?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I just know that, this is very important and vital information as another data point for us as we're going through to make this decision. But I do know that we allocated only 30 minutes for this, and I know that some of our board members we have a number of other items that we're going to have to get through. So just wanted to give you that, if you can maybe even summarize a little bit more as you're going through these slides.
Okay. Yep. So
We're gonna move faster.
we don't want to kill you with process. Okay. We got.
Okay, again, well, I won't spend time on this slide because it's a reiteration of what I've already mentioned. So these are kind of a summary of the comments made earlier. We go on to the next individual, Daniel, and very quickly, you can see under potential concerns for both personality and experience, this gentleman had scores and patterns that indicated inflation, trying to be a bit more, positive than perhaps would be the case. Social desirability influence. So he inflated ratings both in personality and experience, and we were able to identify that as an issue. The big concern with Daniel, in addition to having less confidence in the personality and experience data, is that he did have low abstract reasoning. So that is a concern, and that dings him. in terms of the single best predictor of leadership success. And then going on to the summary for Daniel. If you want to go to the next slide, John. Okay, so this is the self-report and personality experiences are inflated. So that puts greater pressure on your interview to really get at some of those factors. He did have, as I mentioned before, some potential culture clashes, just like with Jason, frustration with the level of cooperation and that preference for a hard-driving, agile culture. He may be frustrated with slow responsiveness. The biggest concern is strategic inputs, low abstract reasoning, and in terms of personality, relatively low, and a preference for analytical thinking. So not so much of the horsepower, not so much the interest. That would be a concern. He also has a high desire for work-life balance, and that could create some occasional conflicts where the project requires time that may not be wanted to be provided.
So I think at this point, can we just do a time check? How much time would you like us to wrap this up in, like 5 minutes or 10 minutes?
I think 5 minutes would be ideal.
5 minutes. Okay. Then I think what we will do is go to some of the individual data and just explain this quickly so that you understand what you're looking at and how it can help you make a good decision. And we'll start with this.
John,
Yeah.
could we
Sorry.
at least go back and do Dennis's, if you can give the same kind of quick overview like you did for Daniel, of the individual summary?
Yeah, I think we missed Dennis there. Yep, there we go.
That's Jason. I'm looking at Jason's slide. There's Dennis. Okay, so Dennis had only average predisposition to leadership roles, but good news, his strengths were in the critical areas: influence, leadership, cooperation, analytical thinking, all things he enjoys doing. Very good news. The concern in his personality was the lower innovation and curiosity, again, a more structured, traditional kind of thinker. He has a strong background with strengths in key areas that are important: external relationships, finances, changes. He didn't have as much experience in developing others, so if there's an issue around developing team capabilities, he may not have a lot to draw on there. You'd ideally like to see a higher percentile standing than 64% for assuming critical responsibilities. You could explore his experience around similar critical projects. He is very bright as well, the best single predictor. He also has a very good culture fit. So in those two kind of global metrics, he's quite good. He has lower emotional acumen and a high importance of work-life balance. So there's potential. If you move to the next slide, John, I'll summarize it even better. A potential adjustment issue. So when you have that pattern, low stress tolerance, lower adaptability, self-confidence, less experience in managing transitions, and a personal high importance of work-life balance, that could bring in some adjustment and difficulty. He's got the traditional approach, and he has, from his own personality and experience, more of a limited focus on developing project team member capabilities. So those were the three summaries very quickly done. And now, John, you can go into your comparison.
Yeah, we're going to just go through this in 60 seconds. So we would advise you to take some time and go through from page 14 through the end of the deck, the side-by-side individual data comparison, because we got it set up to show you on 4 key areas, starting with cognitive strength, what the side-by-side looks like for each of them, on 2 critical cognitive areas of numerical reasoning ability and abstract reasoning ability. And you can see that there's some pretty defined strengths here, and then some areas that may not be as strong that you're going to want to look at. We've got a little piece here that's about the importance of the interview process you're going to go through, and we provided you with some competency-based questions that we would advise you use. The next category 3 is personality fit. Pat just took you through that, but this is an important metric we wanted to just, before we wrap up, we do a blended score of all the personality data we collect, and we say, how does it relate to one critical thing, which is leadership effectiveness rating? How do they score as potential leaders of a big job? And you can see that those scores are represented here. Then we go through the data in more detail for the personality for you. And then finally, Number 4 is how they stack up on leadership experience factors. You can see we provide that in a top 3, bottom 3 format, so you can kind of see what their strengths are and what the areas of concern might be that you need to take into consideration. We also, by the way, provide that top 3, bottom 3 view for the personality factors. So everything you need to really understand who these folks are in ways that you're probably not going to get in the interview is in this deck. We will send it to you, and we would invite you to review it and come back to us with any questions that you might have. And I think we're out of time.
All right, thank you so much, John and Pat. Are there any questions from any of the board members? Commissioner Grinberg.
Thank you for your condensed summary report here. I'm just curious of the work you do. I'm not familiar with your firm, but of the work you do, how much experience do you have with a position like this, in particular with candidates with strong military backgrounds? And I'll go a step further. I was intrigued by some of your perspectives, and we got one candidate that's achieved brigadier general, and it doesn't really reflect some of the comments you made.
Yeah, we do. We see a lot of, we have a lot of experience with that in terms of military leaders and how that reflects in a different type of role, which this definitely is. So I think the best answer to that is we're looking at their natural things they're bringing to the table, their acquired experience in key experience factors that relate to success in this specific role, and whether they come from a corporate environment or a public environment or a military environment, we're looking at them as it specifically relates to the role profile here. So it's quite possible, and we've seen it many times, that highly successful military leaders profile well against some of these roles, and sometimes they don't profile well against some of these roles because the success factors tend to differ from success in that type of role in that context.
And John and Pat, just because I have a little bit more familiarity with the work that you guys do, this is just an impression of kind of their natural inherent abilities, but it certainly doesn't reflect if they would have the ability to learn or grow in the positions. Is that correct? Is that my understanding?
Well, the best measure of their ability to learn and adapt to a new situation quickly is going to be their mental horsepower, the combination of abstract reasoning and numeric reasoning. There's decades of research and that has emerged as the best single predictor of leadership success. So if you're looking to how quickly can they learn and adapt to those new situations, that's your best single predictor. There are other areas that you would look at in terms of adaptability, for example, and as a predisposition. And so we can certainly provide a holistic picture on to what extent are they going to go into a new situation and be able to quickly adjust. That's why you may recall I mentioned there was a cluster of results that suggested potential adjustment problems, not guaranteeing it, but potential adjustment issues with the last candidate that we looked at.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. Any questions from the board? Mayor Mahoney.
Just the only thing I have with your analysis is you got to remember this person could be talking to North Dakota legislatures, and Dennis did not look at anybody but Shelley to his whole interview. In our environment, that would not be a cultural fit. That would be an uncultural fit because he really was trying to be a candidate for the board. And I did not see a lot of adaptability in his interview where he understood that he was just not hitting it. You know, when your people are evaluating you are really not engaged because you're not engaged with them. I think Dennis really did not hit it at all.
So John and Pat, I don't think there are any questions more specifically for you. So we'll allow you to excuse yourselves, and thank you very much for taking the time to meet with candidates, meet with some of us to provide kind of that cultural viewpoint, and we really appreciate working with you.
Thank you. We appreciate you as well. And like we said, if there's any questions that come out of this, then we're happy to answer as you go along. So
Thank you. And I want to call to the board that we have a number of data points to look at as we commence going through this interview, this candidate selection. And I'm just going to call on Michael Redlinger to just give just a brief understanding of where the impression sheets came from and maybe just like who maybe was at the meet and greets this morning.
Great, thank you, Chair Carlson and members of the board. So what we have summarized for you today are direct comments. A lot of these are verbatim comments, about 90% of it verbatim, from a number of people who have participated in some sessions this morning. We were over at the courthouse and met in small groups with the three candidates, and then our small groups rotated and visited each candidate room. And so in those rooms, we had a few consultants, we had other engineers from our local units of government, as well as our water resource districts and other local political subdivisions. And so what we did here was summarize just simply the comments that came out of it. And I just put a note on the top of this that by far and away, most of these were the direct comments. So if this feels a little raw, it's because it's really taken verbatim. But we did summarize either where we couldn't read the writing or it was just either a redundant comment or something that we thought was already captured elsewhere. So organized by background and experience, communication abilities, management style and characteristics, as well as board and governance experience, if that was expressed by those candidates. These were unstructured discussions. They were just free-flowing. It was really the topics that the candidate wanted to ask of the local engineers and the consultant teams. And so it was kind of a free-flowing conversation. So Robert, myself, Tracy, we all participated, and we were with different groups and assigned groups. And so we saw this process for about 2 hours this morning. I'll leave it at that. These are just comments that are not ranked. They're not weighted in any way. It's just to try to give you a sense of some of the discussion points this morning from the people who participated in that part of the process. I just want to thank county staff for hosting us over there that helped us move around that building and meet with all of the candidates for a couple hours. So any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Redlinger. And then I'm going to call Attorney Shockley up to just give us some of the legal parameters as we segue into the discussion and hopefully selection of an executive director.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll try to be brief. I know everybody's tired after a long day. Can you hear me better now? Oh, sorry. I'll try to be brief. I recognize everybody's had a long day. So a couple things. The selection process where you debate and select your candidate will occur in public meeting. So you can't go into executive session for those deliberations. If you do decide upon a finalist that you want to select and potentially extend an offer to, you can go into executive session for the parameters of what that offer would look like. We did put on the agenda the possibility of having a closed executive session just regarding the negotiation parameters for the selected candidate. The other is a procedural matter that I'll remind you of, dating back to the creation of the JPA for the authority. There are certain actions that require certain specific, essentially supermajority votes. One of them is the selection of executive director. So in order to have a candidate that is selected and hired by the board, you need at least one vote from one of the three Fargo representatives, at least one vote from the three Cass County representatives, and at least one vote from one of the 5 Minnesota members. You recall there was a lot of discussion about balancing the power between the different entities, and this was one of those votes that would take a supermajority. So happy to answer any questions, but just I want to make sure that you're aware of the procedural issues and the unique voting requirements for actually selecting an executive director. Happy to answer any questions, but recognize that everybody wants to get moving. So
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. And I just will remind the Board of Directors that we have a number of data points that we can take into consideration. Obviously, the interviews with us today is one of the data points. The omnivore report is a second. The impression sheets that we received, and also the scenario response that was submitted by each of the applicants. So with that, I will open this up for discussion. Mayor Mahoney.
Well, I might as well open it up. I think we've done a thorough evaluation today. We had great candidates come before us. I'm going to nominate Jason Benson for our new hire. He's got experience. He knows the project. We don't have to educate him in a lot of ways. I thought Daniel Sundberg was an excellent candidate. He also would make a great executive director, but it's going to take him time and effort to get schooled up on everything going on. I think Jason will be well received by the legislative team. I think he's got some credibility in our community that people understand. As far as I understand in talking to county officials, he's done an excellent job in the county. We have a track record of somebody who has done the things he needs to do, but I know we're going to deliberate this, so if the majority feels the same, then it's just, my recommendation is to hire Jason.
Madam Chair, I would second that nomination.
Okay, I have a motion by Mayor Mahoney and a second by Commissioner Campbell. Further discussion? And I think Commissioner Stevener, I'm not.
What's that?
I'll just say Rick Steen.
Okay, thank you. Just a comment. 3 good candidates. We worked through the process of coming down to the final 3. There are 5 or 6 different good candidates that we looked at. I think the 3 we looked at today were good. They all have strengths and weaknesses. Like I said, there's different data points. You know, you have the interview process, you've got the pre-interview process, you've got the personality deal, you've got the employee feedback, and they all come from different directions. And I would tend to agree with Mayor Mahoney's motion.
Other discussion from board members? Commissioner Colbeck?
Yeah, I'll concur. I also concur with the recommendations. My points support it in that order from today's interviews. Full disclosure, I do work with Jason through the vector control assignment in my portfolio, so I've had direct interactions as well as the 23 flood fight. We worked together quite a bit during that, and I was very impressed with his relationship building, his problem solving, and I was also impressed with the second, Mr. Sundberg, but again, the experiences were different, so that's how I justify my points and ranking.
Commissioner Campbell?
Yeah, I would concur with that, and I think Jason really brings a really collaborative work effort that I've been able to recognize as being on this diversion authority from its inception. And his work ability and his ability to present and work with a governing board is exceptional. And I think that's something that we really need.
Commissioner Sherling.
And I'm just going to echo Commissioner Campbell's comments. Having worked with Jason directly for 12 years on the Cass County Commission, he truly does work very, very well with his board. He knows how to address a board. He knows how to keep us informed on topics. He mentioned in his interview that he likes to get in front of the news. And I think what we've been really, really looking for, he's going to fulfill that role. So I think it would be a great choice.
Councilmember Hendrickson.
Thank you, Mayor Carlson. I concur with everything that's been said. I did work with Mr. Benson on some vector control issues with Moorhead. He's a great help, very transparent, so I think he'd be a great choice. And like Mayor Mahoney said, he'll hit the ground running with experience, and he knows Fargo, Moorhead, and he knows Cass County, and he knows Clay County, so I think he'd be an excellent choice.
Mayor Dartis.
I've had the privilege of knowing General Benson for a long time, and I've witnessed him not only in his role with the county, but what a great servant leader he is within a community. He lives in West Fargo, and his role and all the things that he has done for the community, and in particular for young men and women in the Boy Scouts, is unprecedented. So this is a true servant leader that will be an amazing leader for our diversion.
Any other board members have any further items of discussion or comments? All right, seeing none. Don, could we get a roll call, please?
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Is that me?
Mr. Pepcorn.
Aye. I say yes, yeah, aye.
Okay. Mr. Ebinger.
Aye.
Kolpak.
Aye.
Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Shirley.
Yes.
Mr. Grimberg.
Aye.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
And Mr. Soljwold.
Aye.
And that is everyone.
Thank you, Don. And the decision is unanimous by the Board of Directors that we would be offering this position to Mr. Jason Benson. I do want to at least comment on our other two candidates, and I think that they really rose to the top as well. Both had incredible backgrounds, and I think that overall we had a good opportunity to pick somebody who in a lot of different ways could have been a really good fit for this position. I think it's comforting to know that we are all on the same page with the individual that was selected. And with that, if I could get a motion to go into closed executive session pursuant to North Dakota Century Code Section 40-04-19.1, subdivision 9, to provide negotiating instructions to the co-deputy executive directors and general counsel regarding the terms and conditions of an employment agreement with the finalists to whom the board has determined to make an offer of employment for the position of executive director.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now in executive session.